Hey, are you ever going to start this podcast you've been talking about for like forever?
Do you think that anyone will actually want to listen to something like this?
What is your plan for an introduction?
Are you sure you want to talk about these topics? People usually disagree.
3 hours? Are you crazy?
Do you think you're some kind of expert or something?
Are you planning to have an intro song?
What if a bunch of people get really mad and hate you over this?
Do you even know how to make a podcast?
Are you just doing this because you like to argue with people?
Don't let this be just one more thing that you talk about doing, but never actually do.
Wouldn't it be better to do just one episode for each topic?
Stop trying to change people's opinions. Just live your own life.
Dude, people are never going to agree. Just let it go.
Is this going to be a long intro? Because if it is, I'm bored already.
Hello all. Before introducing this week's guest, I am sure it's a huge surprise that I have something I want to share. It has been said that the belief in a god or a supreme being is a delusion. I personally find this to be a delusional thing to say. Now, you can choose to believe in God or not believe in God, and I support your freedom to do so. But to call it a delusion is what I take issue with. Because when you look at history, and you see how many people from all different time periods, people groups, geographical locations, occupations, etc., and you see that in all of them, the majority of the people had some form of belief in a deity. You can even go to tribal villages that have never had any outside contact with anyone other than their own tribe, yet they still believe in some form of deity. Some of them even have stories of one God who sent his only son to die for the sins of mankind, but that's not what I'm addressing here. I am mainly just referring to the belief in any god or supreme being. How can this be a delusion? That would be quite a delusion if it's going to affect that many people all across the world throughout history. What a grand delusion. The fact that so many people over the last 6,000 years have had the same experience and the same characteristics of the same God working in their lives. The fact that so many died for this same cause must have been some delusion. If the whole idea and concept of God is nothing but a delusion, then the majority of the human race as a whole must have some form of mental disease, while the minority of people who claim that there is no God must be the only ones who are sane. And I know that there are a variety of views of this divine being, depending on which cultures and societies you may talk to, but my point is just the idea of God. I'm not referring to specifics here. For someone to say that having a belief in any form of a deity is a delusion means that for all of mankind, the majority of the population has been delusional. And not only that, but something else to consider. If it is all a delusion, then who is doing the deluding? In order for someone or something to cause a delusion, it must have intelligence, right? Because that's a conscious decision to make. So if we are all being deluded that God is real, but there is no God, then who are we being deluded by? Who is trying to deceive us into believing in a God that doesn't exist? Ourselves? So it seems to me that even the belief that belief in a God is a delusion implies some form of cosmic intelligent being. Thus meaning that the delusion must be being deluded by a deluder who doesn't actually exist, which means that they couldn't possibly be causing delusions because in order to cause delusion, you must first exist. My guest this week is Danny Dearborn, a newer friend and also a school teacher. I had been told by some mutual friends that Danny and I were very similar in some ways, and I did find that to be true while getting to know him through this episode, which was awesome. I also found out that in many ways we are not alike, and that part was awesome too. We talk about many different things in this episode. Among them are Timothy Brindle, underground rap, Hieroglyphics, the group, not the art form, The Roots, Del the Funky Homosapien, Eminem, being voted class clown, Snoop Dogg's gospel album, The Switch movie, Assessing the Art Not the Artist, Angel Studios, The Sound of Freedom, Vidangel, Clearplay, PluggedIn.com, Tyler Perry, Boycotting Disney and Starbucks, Secular, Shai, Linne, NF, 1776, Homeschooling, Faith on Campus, School Policy, Nicknames, Pronouns, Parental Involvement, Calvinism, Determinism, Molinism, Activating the Spirit, Dimensions, Chuck Missler, Spiritual Gifts, and the Evidence for Christianity. Enjoy the conversation.
Let's talk about things.
Let's just talk about things. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, it's going to be fun because I really don't know you at all, hardly. I know we go to church together. I see our sons are friends, but I just know that I've been told that we are very similar in our personality. Yeah. So why don't you maybe just tell me a little about yourself, man? What do you do for a living? Where do you?
Yeah, my name is Danny, or Daniel Dearborn, and I live here in San Luis Obispo. Just kidding. I live here in Santa Maria, and
Born and raised?
No, and that's probably why I had that Freudian slip, because that's where I came from in the college years.
Okay.
From Davis, California, which is right by Sacramento.
Okay.
And so I left there when I was to go to college as a freshman.
You left a college town to go to a different college?
Yeah, I had to get out. And
'cause I know people from here that left here to go to Davis.
Yeah, it's an interesting how we migrate and things like that. And so I'm the baby of 5, and everybody went to a university somewhere, and it wasn't Davis.
Yeah.
But it's a nice little college town, and I visit there twice a year. And so my choice was Cal Poly because of social reasons. Okay. And so I had a lot of friends from my high school going there also. Okay. And so I followed suit, and probably because I didn't want to have sort of like a loneliness experience in college, and I wanted to kind of know people and things.
Oh, for sure.
And so I followed after them. And then I got a job at Pioneer Valley High School, which is where I work now.
Oh,
as an English teacher.
Really? See, I didn't even know this. How cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were a teacher. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
High school. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. English in the yearbook over there.
You're a brave man.
Yeah.
Be a high school teacher.
Different people have their skill sets, I suppose, and so it's not bravery for me. It just fits. And so, so that's been 12 or 13 years in Santa Maria as a citizen. Okay. Davis, California, San Luis Obispo, and then Santa Maria, each one for over a decade. Okay. In each spot, moving continually south.
Okay, very cool. And what point in all that did you meet your wife?
That would be my 5th year of university. I had some great roommates my 4th year, and we took a quarter off because Cal Poly is a quarter system at the beginning of the 5th year, and we went. We bought a van and we drove from Texas to Panama, stopping along the way for a surf/missionary trip. It was / on both because I wasn't a surfer, and they were, and I wasn't sanctified really, and nobody really was. But we had this heart to kind of like, we're figuring out faith, and so, and it was sort of like a, I think we all had sort of like an anti-church raw. God is great, but we're going to do this differently sort of thing, right? You know, like we don't need Sunday mornings. We can just play the guitar in our living room. And there was a neat heart to that. But there was a little bit of like unhealthy rebellion also. Right. So anyway, we got some Nuevos Testamentos, and we're like, we're just going to do this because that's how we read it in the Bible. You know what I mean? Yeah. But, 90% of the time we were, playing chess or sipping coffee or drinking a beer or like looking at the sunset or something like that. And so there could have been a little bit more discipline to be effective.
Sure.
Anyway.
But you were pretty young at that time, right? What are you, early 20s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then got back from that, and a good friend found my wife for me, and that could be a story. There's many tangents, and I'm not sure which directions, because there could be that one, and that could be a 20-minute thing, and you know what I mean? So, but that's your job. You're the one that's supposed to.
Well, we'll get into that more as we go.
Out, because it could be sports, health, and relationships, but it's not. Sure. It's music, politics, and spirituality.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
wherever else that'll take us. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's really no constraints. I don't want to have any we've had people that are like, you know what, I don't like music, but I love movies. So we'll talk about movies for an hour. I mean, it's just like I just really like talking to people. Like, it's really fun for me, like, just to get to know people and talk about, some of the important issues, of course, that are happening in the world. I like to talk about my faith with people. I like to talk about my struggles with my own faith, my struggles with the church. It's even when I have another Christian like you sitting across from me, there's still a lot. I mean, a lot of really cool things we could say. I'm not going to try to evangelize you because you're already there. But I mean, we could talk about things like, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you, it's like, this is kind of a struggle for me. So I mean, yeah, it's all open, but that's later. So
let me comment on what you just said, because I kind of don't like job interviews in a way.
Yeah.
Because I think a necessary part of an employee is humility. Mm-hmm. But you're not supposed to go into a job interview with thinking it would be rude to talk about myself, because they need to know about you.
Yes.
And
but it's awkward, isn't it?
There is it's kind of like a catch-22 as far as that goes.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing in a Christian brotherhood, because you want to have humility and also in sharing a testimony, like of how you journeyed somewhere, you could get into the habit of like, hey man, what's your testimony? How do you know God and stuff like that?
Sure.
And I could say, well, I went to college and I started looking at the different religions, and I really started considering philosophy, and I checked out some different churches, and I read the Bible, and I really started to realize that Christ is real, and he rescued me. But notice that everything I just said starts with the I statement, right? Sure. And that's sort of contrary in a big way to how it works.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like, and so there's power in talking, and power in a testimony. It says that, right? That's how we overcome. Yeah. Right? By the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimonies, and not loving our lives, right? Mm-hmm. But, so kind of notice the imbalance here a little bit. But also, a lot of the things that we might talk about, I am not an expert in.
Sure.
And if you said, if we got into the politics section, and you're like, well, what do you think about this controversial issue that's a hot button right now?
Yeah.
I would probably say to you, if you really want to know about that, here's the guy.
Sure.
Check out this YouTube video.
Yeah, right. And that's awesome. Yeah. That's great.
But just yesterday, this is how I'm arriving that I'm arriving that what we're doing right now is okay.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. I hope so, because you're sitting there. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Paul's writing Romans, and I think it's in the beginning of Romans, he says, I long to be with you so that I can impart something spiritual, right? Yeah. And so here's the book of Romans is the most intricate, detailed, theological, master, maybe book of the Bible, if you want to understand the gospel.
Oh yeah.
But he's like, well, we got to be together.
Yeah.
To get to get something across, right?
Yeah.
And so I could just say to you, well, Ryan, here's a couple links. Just click on these, and you'll understand kind of here's some people that could talk about this and explain this better than we could.
Yeah.
But I think that there's it validates the necessary. We need to have friction and talk about it, and otherwise let's just all go online all the time and have church online, right?
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's excellent, because that's exactly the point. Like, and like Paul goes on to talk about in that chapter, he's talking about from faith to faith, right? He's talking about there's this interaction between the Holy Spirit and each believer. Like, there's a ministry there that even if it's not for evangelism, there's a fellowship ministry taking place. And you're right. So I love the way you put that, because yeah, I can study all I want. I can read all the books I want, but it doesn't replace the spiritual interaction between me and other brothers and sisters in Christ. So I mean, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with studying the books and all that. I mean, there's benefit to that too, but it's not a replacement. It's not the same thing. So I kind of think that's what you were getting at, right?
Yeah, I think before I do something, I want to see if it's a right thing to do. Like this is 3 hours of my day. Yeah. And this is a huge endeavor of your life. Yeah. Right? Yep. So you probably had some you put some thought into whether or not this should be my life hobby. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it's have, yes. What if you were wrong or something? Right. Yeah. Right. That's the story of my life. Yeah. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or man, oh dang, But that's all in hindsight. But all right, yeah. So let's start with easy stuff. We'll get into music. I'll start by saying that I was impressed with your. I don't know if you call it a rap, you call it a kind of a freestyle, whatever that kind of was that you did at the Java and Jams. That was really impressive. I mean, I could never do anything like that. So it was that was pretty cool. And is that something you wrote yourself? No. That's okay. It's like poetry. It's by Timothy Brindle. Okay. And it's called The Humility of Christ. Okay. And it opens with a John Piper sermon extract, and then it goes on into this. It's a rap. You know what I mean? But that guy, does he perform it like that? A little bit. I think I slowed it down. Okay. Yeah. But he does it in that style. It's the same words. It's the same. It's the same inflection and things like that. I slowed it down. Okay. Yeah. You slowed it down because yours was pretty fast. I was trying to follow along. Like, oh my gosh. But you had to memorize. You weren't really looking at any kind of paper or nothing. It's still drilled in there, and that's because it rhymes, I think. And when things rhyme, I think they really go in there. Yeah. Oh yeah, Dr. Seuss all the way, man. That's how he gets his point across. Mm-hmm. So obviously you are a fan of music. I mean, most people are. I very rarely meet people that are not. But do you have that's usually where I start, just the earliest time you remember thinking to yourself, man, this is great. I like this. Whatever this is, I need some more of this. Well, yeah, but there is I have memories, lots of memories of feeling like this is a rad song. Mm-hmm. This is awesome. It's really helping me to connect. Sure. But I would not recommend any of those things. Oh, because this is sure, of course. Because that was I was a different person then. Of course. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, I grew up on NWA and Too Short and some of the filthiest rap you can imagine. That's what I grew up listening to. I didn't become a Christian until I was 23. So I grew up listening to all of that stuff. So obviously, when I talk about that in my past, I'm not saying it in a way like, oh, and by the way, you got to go get Straight Outta Compton, man. That's a real wholesome Christian album. No, of course not. I wouldn't let my kids listen to it. There's no way. But it's part of my past. It's part of my story. That's where I started, and I was nothing but hip hop up until about high school, maybe late junior high school, when the grunge stuff hit. Before that, if anything had guitars, and I'd say guitar music sucks, country sucks, all that other stuff sucks, rap only. And then Pearl Jam came out, and I was like, ooh, wait a minute now. And that put me through that whole thing. And then I got all into the grunge and the Alice in Chains and the Soundgarden and all that stuff that was coming out of Seattle, Nirvana, all that stuff. And then I saw Pearl Jam play live in Golden Gate Park. I was about 16. And a punk band called Bad Religion opened up for him. Again, this is all pre-salvation.
and I was floored, blown away. And to this day, punk rock is my favorite genre. And obviously there's plenty of Christian punk bands that are very good also. But I say all that just to say, like, I mean, I think we all have a past, obviously. We weren't all born Christian. We weren't all born, you know. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is you feel free to talk about however you want to. If you'd rather not mention that stuff in your past that you grew up liking, that's totally fine too. But, I mean, I'm not going to judge you for it. Mm-hmm. And I don't really, I mean, like I said, I think we all have a past. Because it's also fun to talk about once we get to that point where Christian music starts becoming a thing in our lives and we start to realize, oh man, I can listen to music that's just as good as this secular stuff, except the words are wholesome.
Right.
You know, it's got a good message. This is actually impacting my Christian life, you know, so.
Yeah, so I have things like that for sure.
Okay.
And I would call it I was a superficial fan of that particular thing because I don't think that so I was a superficial fan of grunge music in the same maybe era that you were. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
And of gangster rap a little bit. I think we went in reverse order.
Okay.
Right? Because my Seattle Nirvana era was before, and I wonder why that's different, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then my Chronic 2000 Snoop,
oh yeah,
Dr. Dre, and
yep.
all of those things were grunge for me was 96 to 2000, and then gangster rap was okay, so I guess there's an overlap, 99 to like 01 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What year were you born?
I'm 42.
Okay, so you're almost the same. I'm 45, so we're close to the same age. Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Around the same time frame.
Yeah. But the reason I say, like, I was thinking about that word superficial because my fandom was not really listening to the music. It was the culture of acceptance in understanding something and being able to mention something that other people in your social group are mentioning.
Sure.
And dress. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
And I've always liked the art of album covers. And so
yes.
I can remember going to a store that was called The Warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Nope.
Were those around all over California or something? Because I had one in my town.
You wouldn't think so. Yeah, but yeah, they were.
Yeah, it's a Trader Joe's now in my town.
Yeah.
And then just like flipping through the tapes, you know what I mean? And then also, remember when CDs had a large cardboard?
Yes! Dude, somebody just brought this up like 2 days ago, and they didn't have any idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a rectangle that was very tall.
And it was all hollow except where the CD itself was, like in the top, right? And the whole bottom, you could just crumple it up.
Yeah, but it had images and, lyrics, and you could look at it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it was for the purpose of having a greater eye-catching sort of display.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I thought it was maybe a theft device, because then shortly after that, they came out with those big plastic things that would that you need bolt cutters or something to get through it. Mm-hmm. And that's what they had those at the register whenever you bought the disc. But yeah, but how funny, man. No, most people don't remember that cardboard thing. It was and that was like when CDs first came out. And I just remember
that was pretty fun.
How fascinating that was. It was like, okay, wait, you mean I could just push a button and go to the song I want? That was like, blew your mind back then, because you're used to tapes, fast forward. Oh, I went too far. Rewind a little bit, get to the song,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's nuts, man. That's so cool.
Flipping through album covers.
Yeah.
Looking at them and just all the raw, sensational images that can grab your attention.
Sure.
And then we had stores where, the music stores always had the T-shirt section in the back and like all the buttons with inappropriate things on them and,
of course,
and stuff like that. And so, gosh, like how many like tapes did I actually buy? Or how many like gangster rap albums did I actually purchase? Like 2 to 4 or something in the whole. Like, I don't think that I was just a follower in it. You know what I mean?
Wasn't that big of a part of your life. It was like a short kind of phase. Yeah,
it really wasn't. And that kind of leads to another tangent, which is related to music.
Oh, let's hit it, man. We love tangents on here.
So I had a good friend named Jake Staniels in high school who was a leader in music appreciation if I was like a follower and just kind of like catching what other people say and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so his genre would be called underground hip hop, which is really different than gangster rap, and it is very lyric heavy emphasis.
Yeah.
The beat is just a very simple like boom bap or like a drums or something.
Yeah.
And so really the ones that we listened to were one was called Hieroglyphics, another one was called The Roots.
Yep.
Another one was a guy named Del the Funky Homosapien.
Oh yeah. Mr. Dobalina, Mr. Bob.
Stuff like that.
yeah, for sure, man.
So he and I kind of had this idea to have a radio show, and because we lived in a university town, it was called KDVS Davis.
Okay.
And it wasn't just open to university students, but to the community, and there was all kinds of people that could be this local radio station and have a show, right?
Okay.
And so we signed up and did the training. We had a radio show. And I remember the first day where there was like an initiation and lots of new people were there that had their different ideas of what to put on the radio show.
Yeah.
And they went around the room, what kind of music do you like? and I said alternative. And now I don't even know what that means.
No.
I think there was a radio station that I listened to that called itself alternative rock,
right,
which maybe is different than like a classic rock or something like that.
I guess, yeah. I never understood. I know when that term first came out, I think it was, at least back when I used to hear it in the early 90s, late 80s, it seemed to be used to describe what we call grunge music now. Right? Like, Pearl Jam's an alternative band, Nirvana's an alternative band. But you don't hear people say it anymore. Now when they say alternative, I don't even know what it means now.
It was a word for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you start out with a 1 to 3 time slot. He was really into these types of groups, right? And there was even one time where I went with him to San Francisco for a concert where Hieroglyphics was and a lot of other people.
Oh, cool.
And unknown, undiscovered Marshall Mathers was there.
Oh, no way.
Walking around, passing out, hey, check out my group.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Was it the D12? Or was it?
It was a little white guy with glasses.
Okay.
A little baseball hat.
But I mean, the demo he was handing out was,
I don't know
was his group or was it him solo?
I can't remember that. I just remember he was small enough to walk around and pass out something.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, he so this KDVS Davis radio show. I wasn't really into that side of it, but I liked listening to Loveline. So there's a testimony right there.
With Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla.
So there's.
I think we all listened to that when it first came out.
Yeah, but however, I really identified with Adam Carolla specifically because of his brash sarcasm and quick wit, and which is a part of my past as well. I was voted class clown in high school, and it wasn't because I was saying edifying jokes that were making people feel good about themselves, right?
Yeah.
You know, in retrospect, it was like class jerk or something. You know what I mean? Class sarcastic punk to the teachers.
Yeah.
Right? So, anyway, he's all into his hip hop, and I like give me like 10 minutes once in a while to try like to be funny online or something. You know what I mean?
You're the resident
Which is hard
stand-up.
because you don't have any content
of
like people calling in. Like they had a whole system. You know what I mean? I was like,
sure.
So it didn't really work.
Yeah. You just had to come up with it on the fly, without like actually responding to somebody specifically.
Yeah, I don't know. We were just like goofing off, and one time we were late, and so the guys that were right before our show put Ice Ice Baby on repeat as a mock, like as if, oh yeah, that's what these kids like, because they were like a death metal people before us, and so they put this on repeat as because we're like, you know, 17-year-old kids, like not very disciplined to wake up at 2:45 to drive down to the thing at 3 a.m. for the start of our shift, you know.
Oh man, that's how early you guys went in there?
It was a 3 to 6
a.m.
Yeah, it was the middle of the night. And that's all.
My gosh.
That's all that you get, you know.
Wow.
And there was a that ended bad. I could get into that some other time, but the show thing.
Right.
And that's like kind of a music memory, is that particular phase. It was really just maybe 4 months where we sustained that, which is pretty good.
That's pretty impressive, really.
If you're having that phase in your life. You know?
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, actually. I mean, that's most of those things don't last very long anyway, unless they get a huge following or
little
whatever.
Hobbies, little teen
hobby.
You know?
Yeah, something. So what about fast forwarding to like now, as an adult, as a 42-year-old? Do you have a favorite genre, or do you kind of still kind of bounce around?
Yeah, well, like you said, now lyrics matter.
Right.
Because I need to feed my mind and soul good stuff, you know? And I had an assignment when I used to teach juniors. It was called Below the Surface Iceberg or something is what I'd call it. And the students would choose a piece of media, whether it's a song or a movie, and say, here is the appealing value above the surface, and here is the much larger symbolism and insinuation and what it's speaking to people and what it's doing to people. The iceberg below the surface that you don't see or appreciate when you're doing it. First.
You would do this with your high school students. That's really
they would
cool.
choose one, and sometimes it would work out. My as a teacher, typically you'd like go first and give an example.
Sure.
Right. So the one that I did was the movie Fight Club, and I would say, here is a movie that has fighting and guys that are ripped and a cool soundtrack and an explosion scene and a chase scene and shooting and stuff like that and cool boxing, right?
Yeah.
Above the surface, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the surface level appeal of, right? And then below the surface, there seems to be like a anti-materialism sort of thing, right? There's a scene where they go through the guy's apartment and see how much it all costs, and then there's a midlife crisis angst of these characters, and they need something more, and lots of stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, it's a powerful movie.
Yeah, but many people just watch it and see the surface on the top is what that's kind of the point of the assignment right now. Sometimes this would work for teens, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But now that you're asking the question about adulthood, everything is rising to the top, and I just can't. That's why and maybe why you can't also listen to Pearl Jam or Snoop Dogg and be like, man, I'm really appreciating the beat right now,
right?
And put the lyrics, like, it's just impossible. There's no way. If somebody like had that playing, I'd be like, can you please turn that off? Because I can't even be in the same room. But that's the level of vulnerability and saturation that I would have. You know what I mean? And
well, for me, I guess it would depend on the song too, because there is still some Pearl Jam I do still listen to, but obviously not the profane, or if there's anything that's even remotely demonic sounding, or like not that they're really like that, but there are some bands that might have a song or two that's like, I'm not gonna ever listen to that song. You know what I mean? So, but I don't know about Snoop Dogg. You'd be hard pressed to find anything of his that was clean and family friendly, and you know. But he put out a Christian album. Did you see that?
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, it was interesting. So I work at the library. I think you know that already. Oh, I saw you there. That's right. But one of my jobs is to catalog and process the music CDs that come in. Well, a couple years ago, I don't remember the title of the album now, but it was literally Snoop Dogg, and it was a gospel album. It was being promoted as a gospel album, and I was like, what? Are you kidding me? So the first thing I do, I'm like reading the lyrics. I'm like, okay, because that's the other thing I do whenever I catalog these CDs, where they have a parental advisory sticker and the music is filthy. But if you ever go back to the thank yous, I just want to thank Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, for saving me and for giving me the gift of music. And I'm thinking, whoa, what? Like, little disconnect here. You're thinking he's your Lord and Savior, yet this is the kind of music you're making?
Oh, so the lyrics weren't good also?
No, I'm talking about like what stuff with parental advisory on the front, because it's got such filthy, sexual, profane lyrics, yet they're thanking Jesus in the back. So that was what I was going to think was going to be the case with the Snoop album. But it wasn't. It was totally clean. And all the songs were about Jesus and about God, and about, and supposedly he was claiming, which I'm always like, wait a few years, we'll see. Mm-hmm. And we did. We waited a few years, and Snoop's next album, again, parental advisory sticker around the front again. It's just like, okay, I don't know if that was a phase or what, kind of like Kanye West, kind of put out a Christian album as well, but. Yeah. But anyway,
so that might be where we're a little different, because you had mentioned I can still listen to a Pearl Jam album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not the ones that have the profane stuff.
Right.
But maybe one that is neutral, we might say. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
But I think, how about this phrase? There's no such thing as secular.
Okay.
So if you digest that, it's that we are... We're seeing things naturally, mm-hmm. but there's a spiritual realm, and everything has an intention. Everything has a heart. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a influence. So, I suppose there's different layers. There's is this talking about something that's really bad? Mm-hmm. And then there is maybe the next layer. Is this talking about something that is neutral? Okay, pause for a second. A song that's talking about something that's neutral, then I have to reflect, well, I know that music is powerful and influential, and this is going to lead me into neutrality. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's choose something that's completely neutral, like a car.
Sure.
Somebody is like having a fun song about a car, or something like that.
Sure.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, mm-hmm. but I'm feeling like, do I even have time for neutrality? Right. I have wife and kids and job and crisis returning at any point. Mm-hmm. Do I want to be found, in appreciating something for its neutrality, for maybe just whimsical entertainment or something like that.
Sure.
Next layer down is something. Okay, never mind. Forget layers. It's not layers.
I think I know where you're going.
There's offshoots of different ways that you can assess whether something goes into your brain.
Yeah.
Another one is this talking about Christ, but who's talking about it?
Right.
And this is kind of like the Snoop Dogg thing. Mm-hmm. When he says Christ, what does he mean by that?
That's correct.
Right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I was at a crossroads of whether or not to take my family to what's it called? The Switch.
The Switch.
Okay, there's a movie in the theaters right now.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I have my own thoughts. I didn't take my family either because there's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so here we have...
but maybe finish your first point first. I don't want to get you off of that.
If you didn't do any research and you just saw this movie, you'd be like, okay, here's a main character that is... going through a spiritual journey. There's some bad choices. He overcomes, makes good choices. There's a lot of there's a satanic character. There's a he comes to an understanding of Christ. Again, I haven't seen the movie, but I've read the plot and all of that stuff.
Sure.
Right, and there is some. It's supposed to be loosely based on Job, but there's also some shifting between different realities and what ifs and different kind of maybe we could use the word dimensions or something.
Sure.
Okay, and so, but the producer is actively practicing Mormon, or the writer.
Is he?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Angel Studios guy or the
person that I guess wrote the script?
Okay, I'm not sure who that is. I know Dallas Jenkins is the guy that does The Chosen. He runs Angel Studios.
Yeah, this is
different guy. You mean
the guy that making the shift?
Okay.
Yeah, is different.
Well, okay.
Yeah. On his bio, he says he went to on his Mormon missionary to South America and practiced Spanish. He's got 3 kids living in Southern California or something.
Yeah, well, I know that's why a lot of people have a problem with Dallas Jenkins, because even though he's not a Mormon,
well, he's
very open to it, and he's even said statements like, "Oh, well, the Mormon God is the same as our God," kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, and I think that was wrong for him to say that.
Yeah. Well, unless he believes it. It's not wrong for him to say if he believes it.
Well, that's true.
I disagree with his statement. But.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for rephrasing me on that. I think that was
his statement was an error, but yeah.
I'm a patriotic American. I believe in free speech.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, right?
Yeah.
So if there is a movie where somebody comes to Christ, but the person that made the movie feels that is one Christ of many plethora of Christs, and one day you can be a Christ on your own planet,
right?
Then I'm like, I just don't feel comfortable.
So that's
like,
a game changer for you.
That's a game changer for me, and it's kind of like a bummer because I was like, I was gonna go, and then my wife emailed me that.
But
that would have been really entertaining.
Yeah, but so like, what if like that's true of the filmmaker? Maybe he said that in interviews that he's a Mormon.
Yeah.
Yet the movie that he's made, let's say, and you watch it and you realize, no, this portrayal of Jesus. Let's say it's a movie about Jesus. I don't even know what this movie's about really, but let's say it is, but the portrayal of salvation, the portrayal of who Jesus is consistent with biblical Christianity and not Mormonism. Do you still have a problem seeing it, even just simply because the guy that wrote it happens to be a Mormon?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why I'm choosing not to see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm more of whatever the message is. Like, to go back years ago, I don't know if you remember this, there was a movie called The End of the Spear. Do you remember this movie? Mm-hmm. There was a documentary that came out right before Into the Spear that was actually much better. It was telling the same story of the missionaries that went to the tribal. Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah.
Okay. And the husbands were killed and the wife stayed on. Everybody got saved. So when they put out Into the Spear, which was kind of like the big studio Hollywood version of the same story, one of the characters who was playing one of the actors who was playing one of the main characters was a open homosexual. So the Christian community just lost their minds. They're like, how can you get a guy who's gay to play a character? This is a Christian story and it's all this stuff. And I get it. I mean, I somewhat understand. But at the same time, I'm like, first of all, I don't need to even know about this guy's personal life, because what I'm interested in is the story being told through the movie. If I can go see a movie and the message is being portrayed and what I walk out of there thinking is, wow, Christ is awesome. Look what he did through these missionaries. Look what he did in the lives of these village people. Then I think that's a plus. Now, if all I can walk out of there thinking is, I can't believe that actor's gay, and I'm not trying to say I'm like pro that stuff. I'm just saying, as long as that doesn't come through the message of the movie, like if they change the story around and be like, oh, and by the way, this missionary, he was actually gay in real life, and we're going to get the gay guy to play the actual. It's like, well, no, that's not the real story. Now you're making it something it's not. Now you're making it like a gay rights movie as opposed to a Christian movie about these missionaries. You see what I'm saying? So I guess I totally get what you're saying. And I think I'm close to where you are, but I kind of fall a little bit on the other side where I take everything as a case by case, like, and even back to like music, right? Like, I mean, I can listen to a band that I know aren't Christians as long as they're not singing about something anti-Christian. But I also get what you're saying, right? Where you're going with that is there is no secular, right? So you're kind of saying it's either of Christ or it's not, whether it's blatantly satanic or it's just talking about a trip to the grocery store. It's coming from a heart that is not of Christ. Is that kind of where you were going?
We're a little different because your example about as long as it has the message of Christ, the people that produce it, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we've got a homosexual guy on the cast or something like that, but sure. It's spot on gospel.
Right.
But in the situation of the switch, it is not spot on if we know that when the creators of it are making it and producing it, and they have in the movie alternative realities or phases or dimensions or something like that, and that is a part of Mormon doctrine.
Sure,
is having different places where there's different gods and stuff like that.
Well, that's where I would agree. If that was in the movie, I would see at that point I'd be assessing the movie, not the person who made it. But there's a correlation, obviously. But my point is, like, let's say that guy never came forward about his Mormon beliefs. Let's say we had no idea he was a Mormon, and he made a movie that didn't have anything in it that was anti-Christian, that we would never know. It would be like ignorance is bliss. We would love that movie. But then say it came out a year later, somebody that might take kind of your stance might be like, oh, wait, that guy's a Mormon?
Okay,
well, I'm not watching that on rerun.
Then I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a little tricky, but I think I'd probably agree with you, because if I was driving down the street and there was a Christmas decoration that said "Praise God," and they put it up there because it's the holidays,
right?
I would say "Praise God," right? Now, I don't know where I'm gonna land on this, but I need to be cautious about Angel Studios. I think
I do too.
I get kind of like a iffy feeling about that.
Yes,
and
I have reasons for that, and I'll tell you that in a minute. But
I feel like anyway.
Well, so okay,
whatever.
so they did The Chosen.
Yeah.
Have you seen The Chosen?
Yeah, and my kids watch Tuttle Twins.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate, and I'm not banning that from the home, and I still I'm not going to I'm not going to throw Chosen out off the Dearborn screen, but I'm feeling like, oh man, like I'm close, and I'm watching to try to figure this one out.
Yeah.
And 9 months to 18 months ago, people have the logos on their shirts, and you go through the Christian community and stuff like that, and it's like, wow, this is
right.
I mean, like, I had some teared up moments. There is a beautiful production and stuff like that.
The Chosen, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but these are freaky times, and so we gotta like be really cautious, and that's my kids are watching this, and so they see the logo, and then and if this studio is also broadcasting Studio C, which is the BYU acting coalition, right?
Yeah.
And they're talented and funny, and it's like, okay, so all of these things are on the same platform, and here's Jenkins going, we're all kind of like,
see, it's weird. Yeah, there's some weird connection.
You have to eventually like be a dad that says, guys, we're getting too close. Like, I love this show, and it's ministered to my family, but we just can't do it anymore.
Right.
And I haven't said that statement, but I'm like, gosh,
you're getting there. Yeah.
If one other like weird thing pops up about this, I'm right on the border.
Well, see, I'm kind of on the border, because there is some weird correlation between Dallas Jenkins and the LDS Church. I don't know why it's there, what it is. That he said weird things. He doesn't claim to be LDS himself, but it's just some weird stuff. But
they use all their props and stuff.
Yeah, and maybe that's why. Maybe it's all because he needs their help. Maybe that's what he thinks. But for me, kind of the turning point, and you may or may not agree with this, most Christians don't agree with my stance. We're very strict about what our kids watch, more so than a lot of other Christian families I know, to the point where we've kind of got a reputation about it, But Angel Studios picked up a movie that was already finished. This is kind of my only thing I will give them credit and say, look, I understand you didn't write the movie, you didn't produce the movie, you didn't direct the movie. You just picked it up because no other studios were picking it up, and you thought it was a good story. It was the movie, I forgot the name now, you might know, with Jim Caviezel, and it was all about the sex trafficking and going in. I mean, fantastic story. The true story of all that stuff happening and what that guy did to save all those children is just unbelievable, right? And I was all excited to hear that they're putting out this movie, because I like Jim Caviezel as an actor. I think the story's great. So I go to we have a website, I'm sure you get into pluggedin.com, tells you what's in the movies. So I go to this website, and it tells me there's a couple profanities in it. And I'm going, whoa, isn't this from Angel Studios? And we've been around long enough to remember that it used to be VidAngel. That's where Angel Studios comes from.
Yeah.
Right? VidAngel.
Yeah, would take stuff out.
Absolutely. Which we use it all the time. We use that and Clearplay. We will edit out movies and stuff, even for just me and my wife watching. It's not just for the kids, it's for us too.
By the way, I should have used that the other day. Or I've never really figured out how it works.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Because I did Back to the Future the other day for my kids. I'm like, oh my goodness.
You forget kind of what's in those 80s movies. It's like, whoa. Yeah, but see, something like VidAngel is perfect for those kind of movies. Yeah. Because then it removes that little stuff. But anyway, I'm sitting here going, okay, you guys are putting your name on a movie that has profanity in it. And you're known as Angel Studios. You're making The Chosen, the story of the life of Jesus. You're making all these Christian movies. And this is what you're putting. And at the same time, you're also a company that first got big by editing profanity out of movies. And now you're having it in your movie. I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? So I was really disappointed. And so I still haven't seen that movie. We might watch it on VidAngel when it gets there, because I do want to see it. But it's like, I can't bring my kids to see a movie like that because it's got crap in it, and it's like, come on, So I don't know. It's just... it's one of those things where I feel like it's a double standard, and I've always if I've seen a Tarantino movie, right, which I was never a big Tarantino guy, but I have seen a few of his movies back in the day, and it's full of profanity, it's full of sex, it's full of gratuitous violence. I expect that from Quentin Tarantino. He's not a believer. He's fully entrenched in Hollywood. Of course that's what he's going to make. But when somebody who's a professing Christian puts something like that out, I have a big problem with that. Because now I'm like, okay, now you're dragging Christ through the mud and you're making it seem like that's okay and that's sanctioned by the Lord. And it's like, no, it's not. You know what I mean? Like Tyler Perry is, I guess, an example off the top of my head. I don't know if you're familiar with his
90210
comedies. Did he do 90210?
Oh, maybe I'm thinking.
Oh, you're thinking of Luke Perry.
Luke Perry.
No, this is Tyler Perry. He does like Medea. He has a whole bunch of movies out, and he professed to be. When he first came out, his movies were being promoted as Christian, family-friendly movies because he's a Christian, like his dad's a pastor, and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, great. And I know all these Christian families like, oh yeah, we went and saw this Medea's First Christmas in the theater, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm starting to read the reviews. I'm going, oh my gosh, this is full of. I mean, yeah, there's no F-bombs or nothing, but it's PG-13 style profanity and plenty of sexual innuendo and stuff. And I'm going, nah, that's not a Christian movie. Like, what are you guys talking about? But anyway, I go on tangents too. So don't feel alone in that endeavor.
Yeah, but to call you out on one of them is,
yes,
you said we're a family that closely watches media and filters stuff. Yet you have a giant Disney plaque on your wall.
Well,
so how's that navigation?
Well,
been
this
for you
this is where we
because there's a little bit of a Disney theme in your house.
Yes, that is all my wife.
Okay.
My wife is a huge Disney person. And this is kind of on topic because this is what I mean. Like, I know a lot of Christians that boycott Disney because of a lot of the things Disney has done. And for me, it's still a case by case. Like, there are certain movies that Disney's putting out recently that we will not watch. We haven't seen the last 2 or 3 Pixar movies because they have to throw a gay character in there. I have to make it about a trans person coming out or something. It's like, that's not what we're going to watch. And I think most of America, secular or Christian, is the same. That's why they're bombing. That's why they're not doing good. Most of America is not interested in a movie like that. I'm sure there's a group of people that are cheering it on. Yes, finally a movie about a trans character. But like 95% of America is like, no, sorry, we support your right to make that movie, but we have no interest in seeing it. So yes, so my wife is a huge Disney fan. I'm whatever. Like, I'm not like if I lived here by myself, you wouldn't see all this everywhere. That I'll tell you that right now. But I'm also not like anti-Disney. Like, I don't hate Disney. I don't. If a Disney movie comes out and it's doesn't have any garbage in it, and because like I said, we check Plugged In for everything. Like, I don't care if it's a G-rated movie.
Yeah.
I will still check the Plugged In review because they're thorough. And they'll tell you something like there's a gay character or there's a this. Because a lot of the other ones won't do that because they don't see it as a bad thing. They're like, well, parents don't need to know about that. That's totally normal and fine. So I will watch it. We'll watch a Disney movie as long as the movie itself is, if that makes sense. Are you kind of more of a no Disney allowed kind of guy, or?
No, now I'm same as you.
Okay.
I would say it's a case by case basis. Although I think if it is by a certain producer, Disney, or if it's PG and above, then we will scour Plugged In pretty closely.
Oh, yeah.
And I have had some good family discipleship opportunities where I'll have the kids read it. It's kind of high level reading, so only my oldest is really able to kind of like read it, what it's talking about. But that's a good way for them to start to discern that stuff. Like, okay, it's got this and this. What do you think? Should you do that?
Okay.
So I think that's
kind of let them start to make that decision on their own.
You know what I mean? But right now, I'm kind of like, let's just stick with G, and then if it's anything different, let's look real closely at it, and sometimes I can just like get a vibe from the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I can see what they're trying to do. Like, for example, like you just look at like the Boss Baby trailer.
Yeah.
And it's like there's like nudity, you know what I mean? And like I don't need to like check plugged in. Like I got it. You know what I mean? I can see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about a company like Vidangel that could potentially take those things out? Is that now a movie you'd want to watch, or are you still like, I don't want to watch it just because of what they're creating, whether or not I take it out or not?
Yeah, I probably would lean more towards I don't want to do the Vidangel route because of what they're creating. Okay. And that's like also a monetary conversation that me and my wife have sometimes is trickle down a bunch of steps. Yeah. Who's going to get my money? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right. And so.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at, because I have met other people that way, that they're like, well, even if I remove the bad stuff, I still don't want to support that company. I don't want to support what they're doing, because what they're doing is bad. And when I watch what they're doing, even if I'm removing the bad stuff, they're still getting my money. You know? Yeah. So it's like, you know.
Yeah, that's a tricky one to navigate and stuff. Right. And sometimes, you know, there's real simple things like, right now it's been like Starbucks or my place.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's a no-brainer for us.
We still haven't been there. We just learned last night that guy was a Christian. I had no idea.
It's a fantastic...
Yeah, does he go to our church?
I think he's a Pacific person.
Okay, because we just learned that the Bellaforno people go to our church. We didn't know that either, because Bellaforno catered that thing last night. Did you guys... I mean, I know you weren't there, but it was the...
Christmas get-together or something?
Yeah, the Christmas social, and the youth does the serving, and it's all to raise money for their winter camp. So Addie was working it, and we just had Asher go with my mom. She went and did. They went and did Christmas shopping together. But yeah, Bethany and I were there. It's a lot of fun, you know. But it was catered by Bellaforno, which we love Bellaforno, but I had no idea that they were Christian owned, let alone that the couple that owns it goes to our church. I had no clue.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. But anyway, I haven't been to my place yet. We see it all the time, and we're like, oh, we should check that out. It's on Broadway, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's legit. Their sign just broke because a semi went around the corner too tightly. So you could go right past it. But you know, right next door to Spearmint Rhino. So
there you go. There you go.
Bright light in the darkness.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I don't frequent Starbucks anyway. But again, it's not for like those kind of reasons, like boycotting or whatever. Because I don't like coffee. I think coffee's nasty. Gross. Chai tea I love. This kind of chai tea. I don't love all chai teas. Well, Starbucks chai tea's nasty.
This has a lot of sugar in it.
It does. Yes, it's like a chai milkshake.
It's just a flavored milkshake that you're tweeting people out on for their interviews.
Exactly. That's the whole point. See, but I've had people say, you know, that's they get hooked on it. They're like, oh, they'll text me later. Hey, where can I get some of that?
Yeah,
I said, well,
it's called sugar.
Yeah. Well, there's nowhere in town really to get it now because Coffee Time, the drive-through one right there by Target, is closed. Oh. It's called Big Train. It's the brand of chai.
Okay.
And then the Cups and Crumbs also had it, but then there's that whole thing going on with that. I'm sure you're familiar with that whole Cups and Crumbs and Orchid next to Jack's.
Okay.
And they also own the Homestead, which was right there across from Orchid Liquor.
Okay.
But then they also opened a Cups and Crumbs down on Miller, down close to the library. Well, there's some lawsuit happening. One of the partners was embezzling money or something, so they've all been closed for like months now. I don't know if they're ever going to reopen. But anyway, there's nowhere to get it. But there you go, another tangent. See, before we leave what we were talking about, though, I want to go back to your statement about there's no such thing as secular, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you mean by that.
Yeah.
I mean,
What do you think I mean by it?
Well, I'm wondering if what you're saying is there's a scripture that when you break it down in the original languages, it's basically saying that there's only two kinds of people in the world. You're being energized by God's Spirit in order to fulfill His will, or you're being energized by Satan to fulfill the lust of the flesh. So if there's only people that are of Christ per se, and in what their endeavors are, what they're doing, what they're creating, or they're of the devil, there is no secular. Like it's you're either for me or you're against me kind of a thing, where even if, let's say, it's a band or it's a movie studio, but they're atheists, or let's say they're not even atheists, they don't believe in God, they're not Christians, but all the movies they're making are totally family friendly, they're not profane, there's nothing bad in them, but still the heart behind it is not Christ because these people aren't saved. So is that kind of where you're going, or am I way off base here?
Well, maybe I'll comment, but I won't give a definitive answer. And the reason why that is because I feel like it's such a interesting and big topic that I would need to like mind map all of my ideas to like get them into a central answer that I could like stand behind.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because, what if I didn't understand you right? And then I was like,
yeah.
Okay. So, there's no such thing as secular. Secular is a word that means, not, well, there's maybe a couple different definitions you could pull off of Google, but it's not, it's of the world, or it's made, or it's produced, or it's for. It is a non-religious
correct
entity.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ephesians 6 says that there's a spiritual realm, right, and there's powers and principalities, and and that is above controlling or hierarchy, higher order, higher dominion, so to speak. So, and then that could be an interesting conversation recently about my father passed away 3 weeks ago. Oh, dang. And then also right before that, I had a big conversation with a Christian that was talking about dimensions, and I called him out on it, and just for the sake of like, what do you mean? I don't feel like the Bible uses that word. Right. Like, what do you like? Let's break that down.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's another thing if you want to later.
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, for right now, if we're living in a world that I believe as a Christian that is created by God and for God, that it's impossible for something to be absent from that reality that we live in now. So, but you were talking about art and culture and media, kind of, or that was the topic. Yeah. Yep. But let's just go with like a tree. A tree is not secular. Right. In the example that I'm giving right now. Sure. Of dominion and control and authority of the world that has been made. Yeah. Right.
Well, secular would have to go with something that man created, to where God created the tree. But what about like a building? Would you say a building is secular or no? Is that?
Okay, I guess no. A building's not secular.
Okay.
What do you think?
That was just a thought. Well, I don't. Well, it depends on what we mean, right?
We're trying to navigate this. You know what I mean? So. Yeah. What about a tire?
Yeah, right.
We could name every item.
Right. Well, just anything that's kind of man-made versus God-made. Like things in nature are made by God. Like they're literally made by God. To where things man makes, God makes man, and then man creates things. But,
You're right. So, there's a distinction there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it kind of boils down to what we were talking about earlier. What is the intent of the creator, and then what is the outcome that was created, and so I think that's something that needs to be navigated, because just in a family devotional last night, my wife and I were trying to discern whether or not to receive a I want to be discreet, a gift from a benefactor, from a family member that is not in Christ.
Okay.
It's not a financial gift. It's like anyway, it doesn't matter. But and that we were praying about it and like what to do, how to like. It was more of like an experience. We'll call it that, a trip, and we read about how it was a Christmas. We were going through this nativity, and it was the devotional for that night was, hey, Caesar Augustus called the census to make Mary and Joseph go from one town to another to fulfill a prophecy of where Jesus was supposed to be born.
That's why he made the census? Or that was... The reason Mary and Joseph did that was because of the census. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so Caesar Augustus, he was an unbeliever. He didn't know that he was being used. Right. Yeah, so here's an unbeliever, Caesar Augustus, being used to carry on God's kingdom. Yeah. So maybe that and other biblical examples could help us navigate so
no, that's helpful.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
Disney's doing stuff, right? But
not out of God's
control.
Absolutely. So yes, if that's what you're saying, then I agree with you completely. Like even the things we would deem as terrible things happening, it's not like God's sitting on his hands or his hands are tied and he's going, I just don't know what to do. I have no control over this. These people are running crazy and they're doing things I don't like, but I can't do anything about it. No. Yeah. He can stop it at any time. So if he's allowing something, he has a reason for that. Even if we don't know what that reason is, sometimes in our life we come to things we're like, why? Right? That's always the biggest question. Like, why? And we don't always get an answer to that question. We sometimes just need to be like, the why is not important. What's important is that we need to trust him and we trust that he knows what he's doing, even when I don't know what he's doing. I don't need to know what he's doing or why he's doing things, right? Like that's not the most important aspect. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll get to sit down and watch the highlight reel of my life and be like, all right, Lord, why'd you do that right there? Oh, because this was going to happen 30 years down the road, Ryan. See, this is why. Oh, now it makes sense. How did I miss that when I was alive? I missed the whole point, or whatever, So, but anyway, yeah. I thank you for explaining that in the way you did, because now I think I understand better what you mean by
maybe I
not being secular. Yeah. So all things are in God's control. God is sovereign. God knows what he's doing, and nothing can happen outside of his allowance. There's really no other way to say it, because he's either all powerful or he isn't. And this is always the atheist's biggest. I was just that clip that's been going around lately with Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he's saying, somebody asked him if he believes in God. Have you seen this? No. Somebody asked him if he believes in God, and he basically says the same thing. I mean, what he's saying is nothing new. The atheists have been saying this for years. Well, the Christian God is described in the Bible is described as both all powerful and all loving. And I look around the world, and I just can't imagine how both of those things can be true about God. And then they go to talk about all the atrocities that are happening across the world, and they assume that means God's unloving. Because if he's all powerful, he could stop those things from happening at any point. And since he doesn't, that means he's not all loving. Do you see the conclusion they come to? It's a wrong conclusion. Mm-hmm. Because really what it comes down to is they just don't understand God. They think God has to think and act like they do. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking, oh, I would stop that guy from doing that if I had all the power to do so. I would take that mass shooter out before he could even enter that school, But you're not God. You don't have all the knowledge that God has. Like you don't know the final outcome of all these things. You just don't.
All accounts will be rendered in the end. So
yes.
Hang on, Neil.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because
yes,
you get to the end of the book and you see that all of this. There won't be like. Nobody's going to get away with something.
No.
Yeah.
And that's something to rest in too, right? Because it's definitely a human trait, I think. But we're like, we want some kind of something.
Yeah, justice.
Justice. Yes, thank you. I kept saying revenge. I was like, no, that's not the word I'm looking for. Justice. You want justice. There's a pastor I listen to that's used that example. He's like, what if, the guy that murdered your whole family is on trial? And the judge is up there, and they did the whole jury, and the jury showed all the evidence. It came back, okay, this guy definitely did it. Like, he's even saying he did it. He's saying he's so happy he did it. He loved doing it. and the judge says, you know, all the evidence points towards you being guilty of this terrible crime, but I'm loving and merciful, Judge, so you can go. I mean, the world would, especially that person's family would lose their mind, obviously, well, but then people want God to be that way. Why isn't God like that? No,
he is if there's atonement.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right,
so
which is the mercy.
God,
absolutely.
I'm going to let you go, but there has to be a consequence that's going to fall on the cross. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so before we leave music and get, we've been all over, which is really cool. We've kind of already been digging into spirituality politics, which is awesome. Could you maybe give me like your 5 favorite of all time? Is that something you think you could swing? Bands, artists, singers?
Well, now that this is not before Christ, but an after Christ conversation, anything by Timothy Brindle or Shai Linne. These are people under what's called lamp mode recordings. Anything like that is what I'm doing right now.
Timothy Brindle? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he's the guy.
Is he the one that did the one you did, right? Because
I'm a fan of that. And I think I've heard somebody call this movement young, reckless, reformed hip hop. I'm speaking of lyrics. I'm so into language and words and seeing the lyrics that a lot of things I listen to, I like I like to do them through YouTube so I can see the lyrics displayed.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
Especially with things like rap that's so fast you can't really hear what they're saying.
And hymns, and so that there's a participatory aspect. Right, and so my wife in worship leans more towards a free flow. Upper room, charismatic, Kansas City IHOP style of.
That's a very detailed description.
Yeah. Non-scripted.
Yeah.
Worship music that is spirit-led, and the artists do not necessarily know the words before they're on the stage. And or they kind of do, and they have a semi-plan of which ones they're going to do maybe. Right,
but open to the Spirit's leading.
Yeah, which I also enjoy. However, I really... It's kind of tricky because I'm very stingy on music that I already know, right? But Bible says sing a new song unto the Lord, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm like, if I have a half an hour to wash dishes and clean the house, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be moving my body and walking around this home. So I want to, and nobody else is around. I get to blast something.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Right.
Because it drives my family nuts when I do it when they're home. So it's like, okay, you want me to clean the kitchen, babe? And you guys aren't going to be here? I get up my block rocker and boom, crank that up.
Yeah. But that is not a moment where I am ready to listen and hear, what's new? You know what I mean? No. It is a singing along.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And so in that case, it's Amazing Grace, how sweet this is. Or just something that is so ingrained so that my mind can detach and I can fully engage in worship. Yeah. And so, it's kind of like in Sunday when there's a new worship song, it's kind of like oh man, because you have to really, it's a different level of mindset to think about, like, okay, what are we doing here? Right. But of course I appreciate it because then later, a month down the road, it's like, you know what, that I've thought about that word or that particular lyric or that line, and that was impactful to me. Now, sometimes you hear something and it's like, that is my song, right? But typically not, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes I can sing along and really appreciate the spontaneity, if you'll call it that, of the things that I mentioned that my wife likes. But it's the fourth time that we've played that particular set.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I can participate in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
So Timothy Brindle,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to check him. I've never heard of him until from you. Shai Linne, I have heard a few songs, and if I remember correctly, he had a song where he was calling out like all these false teachers,
yeah.
and was that the name of the song, False Teachers?
Yeah.
That's a good song.
Yeah,
and I feel like there's that one, and there's one other one I heard, and I can't remember what it was. This is years ago. It was probably 10, 12 years ago I heard this. It was back in the day. There's a pastor I like. I'm sure you've heard of Paul Washer. I like Paul Washer, and Shai Linne is one of the rappers that not that Paul Washer's like some hip hop guy, obviously.
Yeah,
But he talks about like Tripoli and Shai Linne and some of these guys because first of all, because they're reformed like Paul Washer, but they're also so bold in their rap. They're not like the kind of cookie cutter, just trying to make money kind of people. They're like, look, we're not here to make friends. We're here to spread the truth. Now, if that means I get likes, great. If not, don't matter. Right? Like whatever. Like it's not about that, you know?
Yeah, and not only is the words not trying to get likes like you're mentioning, but also coming from that underground hip hop movement that I used to appreciate a lot. It's very lyric heavy, and the words are at the forefront. The lyrics are at the forefront.
Yeah.
And the beautiful alliteration and metaphors that the artist uses. Timothy Brindle has a song about sin where I think he rhymes comparing sin to like a used tampon or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, like filthy rags in the Bible, that's what that word means.
Yeah.
It's the menstrual rags.
So sometimes, you're listening to rap music and you're like, wow, how did they ever find a creative way to fit that word into that particular, situation?
Yeah.
And how,
yeah,
forever before the creation, or there was Satan, the Son was with the Spirit and Father in glorification, before worship from fine angels, and it goes on and on. It's like, really neat.
Yeah.
It's poetic,
Oh, it's fascinating to me. That's something that I've never been able to do. Like I always admire people that can do things that I can think to myself, I could never do that. And I think that the rappers that are good rappers, that's the way I feel about them. Because I'm like, I don't even know how you, are you familiar with NF?
No.
Have you never heard of NF? Oh, dude. Ooh, I'm going to send you some stuff. You're missing out.
Cool.
He's a Christian rapper too, but he's very, he's really good. Anyway, the way that he throws stuff together and just like, how do you come up with that stuff? But you can tell that probably the way he's writing songs, he's literally just starting a recorder and he's just basically freestyling off the top of his head. And then he'll go back and listen to, okay, I'm going to change that a little bit, move that around a little bit. But it's just so free flowing, and it just one word connects to the next, and it's bam, 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 bam. And it's like, dang, that's so impressive to me. And especially if you have a message that you're conveying also. You're not just saying a bunch of random words that don't mean anything. And that's the other thing about NF is he's very heartfelt, very, he's not necessarily like he is an outspoken Christian, but I mean, it's not like you listen to his music and it's like praise and worship or something. Like it's all about Jesus or something. But he talks about life issues and the things that he struggles with. And it's just so raw and deep and emotional and just like really, it's just like reality. Like for some people, not me. Like I don't listen and go, oh yeah, man, I know what that's like. My mom also died of an OD. No, it's like, I'm not doing that. But I'm kind of surprised you haven't heard of NF. That's kind of, he's pretty popular the last 7 or 8 years maybe. But anyway, I'm gonna send you some stuff. All right, so let's jump into political discussion, even though we've kind of already done that.
Hey, it's your rodeo.
A little bit, you know. So is politics something, well, let me say this first. There's kind of two ways we can go at this. Like and I'm fine with either or both. Some people are really interested and involved in like literal politics, like the government, the president, the governor, the mayor, the laws being passed in our country, all that kind of stuff, and the inner workings of all that, and that's fine. I like to talk about that stuff too. Or there's the other side of politics, which is basically just issues in our world, things that are happening, things that are affecting the lives of our children, affecting the lives of us, changing and molding our world into something it wasn't 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And we're in this constant kind of changing all over the place, it seems. And there's many different topics we can go into and all of that as well. So that being said, I usually just ask, like, do you consider yourself to be a political person, or are you kind of like a bury your head in the sand kind of guy and just be like, you know, you guys do you, that's, you know.
I don't think that I would do a very good job. Maybe I would get a C- on knowing the names of figures or the names of policies.
Okay.
And bills that are moving
sure
back and forth. And so, you know, my like current event news information is, I think, is maybe lower than would be necessary for a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes if I would be interested in the topic, it would be more a global umbrella of how certain philosophies and approaches to rulership and government affect people's lives and nations and how things are run. So maybe like political theory.
Okay.
So
yeah, exactly.
How's that for an answer?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
Yeah, that's enough.
So then I would ask, like, in your opinion, what do you see as one of the biggest issues facing our world or our country, or, I mean, just in general? Like, what do you see as, I mean, obviously godlessness, right? Like the lack of...
The biggest issue is sin, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what you're asking, though.
No, only because I know that would be both of our number one answer. Yeah. It's like, besides that kind of thing, you know, even though that plays into everything, of course, but...
yeah, that plays into everything, so
yeah.
I don't know. That's a little tricky, you know, so you could shoot at it at a different angle.
Right.
Because I could say... I could narrow it down and be specific and say something like, you know, abortion or something, like, which is like a big deal, but
right.
But that would be sort of like a, you know, like a very small sampling of what you're asking about.
Sure.
Right, because there's lots of other things that are really not good.
Yes, but we can talk about any and all of them too. So I mean, we don't have to.
I suppose that there is an hour, so you couldn't talk about all of them, but you could talk about some of them.
Yes, we could pick some of the main ones that we feel.
But how to decide which ones and why?
Yeah,
that's the tricky part. But,
well, let me put it this way: you wake up tomorrow morning, and you have been given all power, all the money you would need in order to, quote unquote, fix America. Where do you start? What would be one of the first things you did?
You said I have all power and all money?
Yeah. Sky's the limit as far as your resources and everything. You've been given the keys to the country and been told, all right, Danny, it's up to you to fix the country. We'll give you all the resources you need to do so. We trust you completely to make the right decisions here. How are you going to start fixing things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to spoil your question because it was really well phrased, because I really kind of want to give you a thumbs up on the question, but
okay, all right.
And I will answer it, for the sake of conversation, but I'm not sure if that's possible because, for one, I'm a human being, and so I could mess it up more.
You could.
Right.
Yeah. But what would you do?
But I think I could do better than some other people, and that's the whole point of your question.
Sure. Yes.
But also, the reason why our country, I think we're just talking about national politics, the reason why why our country was having what I would call good times at certain times and bad times at certain times might not have been because of effective government structures or policies. It might have just become, it was because of God's favor, right? And so from a biblical perspective, there are seasons for nations to do really well,
right?
And seasons for people to be in captivity,
right?
Right.
Right.
Okay. So, but it was a beautiful question, so let's go ahead and answer it. Right. See, that's the problem. That's the problem with talking to somebody that is trying to be really cautious and spirit-led. Is you ask them a really nice question, and then they'll just say, "Well, but God."
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh man, I just wanted to actually talk about something." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I think we can both agree that is the ultimate answer, like to every problem.
Sure.
Right. Well, what needs to happen? God does. Like, all these people need the Lord. They need to be following Christ as opposed to following their own flesh. Like, that's just true, right? But like, I know it's hard to even say it that way, but to say, like, we'll just kind of remove that aspect. Let's say that they're that's not even a factor. I know it's hard to say that because it is a huge factor, but just like as far as like how to run things, how
I feel you, man.
Yeah,
I'm small. I'm a small government guy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So, I was raised in a Democratic home. I voted for Clinton Gore. I think was my first. After I was 18, and it was really sort of like a process of various conversations and thoughts with people. Right after college, I got a job at a place called Alpha Academy, which is a transitional home for teens and young adults, whether they're past speed drugs or some type of terrible thing that happened to them.
Yeah.
And it is still in San Luis Obispo, and they run a dog kennel there. And so the kids take care of the dogs, and it's a therapeutic, great program. And the guy that runs the place would take me to Margie's Diner once a week.
Rest in peace to that place.
Yeah. And
bummer.
I would have a big bunch of eggs, and we would talk about, because I was a house manager, and so the boys would work with the dogs during the day, and then in the evenings we would do the dishes and have a Bible study or make your bed, and let's not get angry at each other and all that stuff, right? So anyway, oftentimes that was spirituality and politics and stuff like that, and so I would say that was one of my first introductions to, hey, what do you think about this, and how should government be run, and because I, for the first 20 years of life, you just kind of like running off your environment. You know what I mean, I was super pro-choice, and I'll tell you a story about how that happened at one point. Yeah. Which is just a similar kind of thing. Like, you just have conversations with somebody like
sure.
I never thought about that. Like, thanks for explaining that to me.
Right.
And so anyway, that he was a Republican and stuff like that. So that's kind of how that happened.
Okay.
I think that human beings with freedom will control outcomes most of the time probably better than a large government entity attempting to control those outcomes. General word outcomes could be replaced with economic, social, education, lots of things that we're trying to decide in how human beings living together have to make decisions.
Yes.
Because if you knock on the door of the White House or a Capitol building in the middle of the night, nobody's going to be there to answer for that. And so if I own my own property, it is mine and I will take care of it better than a collectivist entity trying to let's all get together and do this, you know. And of course,
because you have a stake in it.
Our both our kids watch the Tuttle Twins, or you've seen it before, and it's very libertarian, and so a general concept of less government entities, the better. And then it all comes down to like, well, what actually do we need, right? Is there a need for a military protection? Like, okay, yes. Well, how involved are we going? Other places? Okay, well, that's another question to decide, right?
Sure.
You know, okay, so there's transportation, there's roads. Are those going to be privately owned, and you pay a toll to the private owner of that road when you want to drive on it, or are you going to have that a government-owned road and you pay taxes and we're sort of collectively sharing? Which one is going to make a better outcome for us to get around, right? So I think for the most part, I'm going to initially side with how can this be initiated by free citizens. 1776. How did they do that?
Right.
That's the American sort of principle of let's boil this down to the least amount of bureaucratic oversight as possible. Right. Which is, you know, relatively ironic because my salary, and I think yours too, comes from a government entity.
Yes.
It's not a private library, right?
No, it's city.
Right. So I work for the government too.
Right.
And so here we are nodding our heads about this, and bunch of hypocrites, huh?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And
but if you go back to like, you're talking about like 1776 and kind of the foundings of the country and that kind of thing. So are you the kind of person who looks kind of at the framers and the founding fathers and the way that do you think that what they put together at that time was something that we still need to hang on to? Kind of the conservative mindset would be like, we need to be conserving what we started with, because there's a whole other section of the country today that's almost like, get rid of all of that, let's start over. Constitution, who cares? You know, we live differently now. People have evolved differently. That was hundreds of years ago. You know, like that whole kind of thing. So do you kind of hold to that more like, let's stick with what we started with? Or are you kind of more on the progressive side of let's kind of revamp things here?
When I say 1776, I wasn't referring to the Constitution, but since you asked, I don't even think that the progressive people that you mentioned that want to throw that out even really want to do that. Like, I don't buy it, because they are not forfeiting their homes.
Right. They want to throw it out unless it is a detriment to them in some way.
They're not, you know, forfeiting their right to protect themselves or their right to say things. Right. So I think that's kind of smoke and mirrors. So I'm not putting it like too much thought into that statement that you said. then that would be the question of, well, why did I say 1776 if I wasn't referring to the Constitution?
Yeah.
What I meant was...
Yeah, what were you referring to, man? Come on.
What I was referring to was it seemed like so much of life in that era, just the era, okay, not the date, was personal responsibility. And right now, grandma doesn't need to live with the family, you know what I mean? Because there is excellent, wonderful state services that can find a nice home for grandma. And right now, the school that I work at provides 3 meals a day, tutoring after school, and medical care on campus. And that's wonderful. And so mom and dad don't need to, worry about packing a lunch,
right,
or checking in on homework, or making sure that, that particular medical need is met.
You mean the students?
Yeah.
They can get 3 meals?
Okay, so there's more. Yeah, it's free.
Oh my gosh.
There's breakfast, which is really kind of like, it's not like bacon and eggs or something.
Right.
And then there's a snack, and then lunch, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was on a roll, man. So
sorry. Sorry, I was like, I couldn't help thinking to myself, like, that wasn't like that when I was in high school.
Yeah, maybe you're hungry or something.
I'm always hungry.
45-year-old guy showing up on campus. Can I get some of that over here? Because that's my taxes.
I heard you guys had an omelet guy here. Where's he at? Let's hit this.
So anyway, what does that do to us? We're the grandma example, the kids example, somebody breaks their leg in back in early America, and they can't work. It was probably, if somebody was going to come to the rescue, it'd be the church, not, or an organization of gentlemen in that community and ladies that are like, let's have our Kiwanis Club or our Lions, so to speak, and we're going to make sure that our town doesn't go into shambles, and that is a little bit more of a personal approach to care and to unity and to family.
Yeah.
Where now when I'm driving around, or these days when I drive around Santa Maria and I see something going on, I'd be like, they got it.
Right.
There's people for that.
Yeah.
Because there really is people for that.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. So.
And you might just get in the middle of it and make things worse.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
And here we are. We're the people for that.
Right.
Right. So, you wanted your kids educated back in the day. You better get some books and teach them how to read. These days we can send them to the library.
Right.
Right. You want to make sure that your kids' anxiety doesn't fully disrupt their lives, and they don't get addicted to social media and all of these other and make sure that they know how to use birth control and stuff like that. Well, they're training the teachers on how to raise up this child, you know what I mean, so they don't. Right. And so
and how do you feel about that though? Do you think that's a role that teachers should have?
Wait, before you ask me that question, let's put a concluding paragraph on what I was just saying. Is personal responsibility, right? So,
I wrote that down actually because I want us to talk about that too, because I see that as a huge problem in the world today. Big time. The lack of personal responsibility, I should say. So then the answer would be no to your former question.
Okay. No, because
do you think people should be?
Because parents should be parents and have the you could say what came first, an over-involved state or an under-involved parent. I don't know exactly, but it doesn't matter because the state needs to back off.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of like the answer to your question of whether or not I should be the psychological nurturer, the sexual advice person, and the et cetera, all these other roles besides teaching grammar.
Yeah. And do you guys homeschool your kids?
At this time, no. We've been through a lot of different ups and downs on that.
Okay.
We were Trivium. We had a Trivium phase.
Yep.
We had a Heartland phase.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are full in at Valley Christian Academy, which we love. So we're in a season where my wife needs to have some daytime.
Yeah.
You know. So.
And your oldest is junior high age, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you have 4 kids?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did Trivium. I have my 2 oldest kids graduated from Trivium at the high school. We've done all different types.
Just depends
we started
what you need that year.
Well, and there's so many options now because I remember when I was like junior high school age. I mean, I knew some high school. There was a girl I was dating for a while. It was a homeschool. Mm-hmm. And, you know, all the stereotypes back then were almost true. It was like, man, they're just weirdos. Mm-hmm. You know, but like now it's such a big thing now. I mean, it was already a big thing when we first started doing it. Back when my 25-year-old daughter was in second grade, that's when we first started doing homeschooling. And it wasn't because of any like, oh, we're scared of her getting this or we want to protect her from this or anything. It was honestly is because she just came home and was like, how was school? She's like, I'm bored. Like, what do you mean you're bored? Oh, she's like, I understand all this stuff already. And I have to sit there while the teacher re-explains it over and over and over to the kids that don't get it. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you're in a big classroom, it's not really one-on-one because all those kids in that classroom have different intellect. They have different learning abilities and disabilities and different ways they see things. So as a teacher of a whole classroom full of kids, you have to spend time the way you need to spend time so that they all start to learn and they all start to get it. Where homeschooling, you can like, no, okay, I can just focus on this one kid, on the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, you're doing great in math. You don't really need much more there. You get that completely, but your English is kind of lacking. Let's focus more on here and the whole kind of thing. But then we did all of that, went through. But my point was there's a lot of options even then. Like we were doing things like through the state. Like we'd still go through the public school system, but we'd be doing homeschooling. And then Trivium came along, which was originally called something else that I forgot now. We started when it was called that. And then after all the COVID stuff, homeschooling got even bigger at that point because like Bethany and I had all kinds of people that were like wanting to meet with us. Like, okay, we're looking at homeschooling now. What do you guys got to do? How do you guys do it? How you been doing all these years?
So you called your weirdo ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Your parents were right after all. I'm sorry. Can you give us advice?
Yeah. Well, what's funny about that is like her family was totally religious. I actually met her at a youth group. I used to go to youth group when I was a kid just because that's where the girls were. Mm-hmm. It was never for any reasons about God, nothing to do with any of that. It was because some cute girl would invite me or whatever, right? Because she's usually like, oh, I want to date this guy, but you know he's not a believer, so you know the only way my parents are gonna be okay with him being my boyfriend is if I get him to go to youth group, and then I can say he's a Christian guy or whatever.
Sure.
So, but she was like full on religious. I was not. Her parents were like, oh, why are you with this guy? Whatever, blah. And years later, I bumped into her later and started talking to her, and she was like the polar opposite. I bumped into her later after I had become a Christian. And now I was kind of on that side of the fence, and she was not at all. She had abandoned the whole thing. She was like sleeping with everybody, and she was drugs and drinking. Like she had gone total 180, and I was like, whoa, like what happened to you? Like, oh, I turned 18 and I left my mom's house, and now I just do it. I was like, oh my God. So I have no idea where she's at today. Maybe hopefully she'd 180 again, and she went back to her roots in Christianity and all that. But anyway, so I mean like, so you guys obviously have reasons for all the different forms of schooling you've done with your kids. Mm-hmm. There's a reason you don't just send them to public school. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reasons for that? Because that's kind of on a political...
When you ask me what are the reasons why I'm having my kids do such and such, then it's not political. It's what are the needs of my kids, right? So,
well, what I mean is there's obviously things that you don't want them to deal with, to be exposed to I'm assuming, by not putting them in public school. Because that's the easiest way for a parent who doesn't care about that stuff, right? You just drop them off, pick them up, hey, whatever's not my concern kind of thing, right? But you're not that kind of parent. You're the kind of parent who cares about your children and is concerned with the kind of things that they're bringing into their minds and everything else. So.
Yeah, I would say that almost all parents are concerned about what their kid is being influenced by and stuff like that. But maybe a large population doesn't think about, again, with the iceberg, what's below the surface and the intentions and all of that stuff. And so, the students at my school, they've got very, very kind parents that drop them off. But if I was going to have a one-on-one conversation with those parents, be like, listen, you need to get your kids out of here right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But that is because I have a whole different perspective on how to raise a kid and stuff like that, and what is happening, and so a part of it is like maybe the negative behaviors and things that are being taught, but most of it is I would say your child is an awesome, wonderful person, and God has a bigger plan for them, and you need to raise them up in this certain way. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like you could say that, though, or do you feel like in a position of working as a teacher at a public school? Because, I mean, I know other teachers, too, and it's kind of like a fine line you have to walk, because if you get too open about your faith, you run some risks,
No. Well, first of all, there's a difference between on campus and not on campus. We're not on campus right now. But even if we were, there is a certain atmosphere of a classroom teacher that can have a stick it to the man ism within their personality that is acceptable / encouraged, right?
Okay.
So we we're government employees, but this isn't a controlled state where we have to say that everything that happens at this school is great, right? So a teacher can have a discussion about this policy that the school came up with, I'm not feeling it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And nobody blinks an eye to that because it's relatively encouraged to be a free-thinking person and to have your different opinions. But you were specifically talking about faith, which is a different sort of hot button in a way. And two things. One is I'm thankful for my campus and the leadership of my school that is kind, free-thinking, generous, and has allowed at least allowed much more than other campuses that I've heard of through word of mouth, environments where a teacher or a student can walk out their faith, whatever faith that is, right? So that's just props to my particular workplace.
Okay.
Right?
So you don't feel like it's real discriminatory against any kind of...
No.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. But then also, the second reason why it's not a condition is because of really good laws that our country has. So if you look up Ed Code, there is a lot of liberties that teachers and students have for participating and demonstrating in their faith. First one is through clubs, because clubs is non-instructional minutes. So that's during lunchtime or after school.
Right.
Right. Now, I'm not going to talk about any type of faith stuff unless it arises for some reason during instructional minutes, because
Right.
I'm that's not my job. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
But lunch is unpaid and after school activities, right? And so
So you could start like a Christian club.
right, we have that, right? So
Okay.
as long as there is a student president and student vice president, and I'm helping to facilitate, whether it's provide my classroom or Bibles or discussion prompts or something like that, I'm helping to facilitate the students' endeavor, getting pizza for them or whatever it happens to be, just as much as the Harry Potter Club or Future Farmers of America or something like that. And there's laws that say you can't discriminate against what type of club it is, and that goes with anything that is a printed material. So we can pass out flyers and we can put up banners that have a Christian logo on them, just like anything else, or a Bible verse, or an assembly, right? If the Asian Pacific Club wants to have a lunchtime performance, we can have somebody get up there and say their testimony or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't had a young person in my tenure that's bold enough to pick up a microphone before the whole school and give their testimony or something like that.
Oh, that's rough.
But
Gotta have some stones to do something like that.
Equality is, that's how it's written, right? There's even some language that says, if they give an example in Ed Code, it's something like, if it is acceptable or common for a teacher during their work day to step aside and engage in a non-instructional activity, such as answer a phone call, like, hold on, I got to check my text or something like that.
Right.
So if there's if it's acceptable for somebody just like, I got to step out real quick and do that, which it is, like, nobody's like bugging somebody for doing that. There might be some workplaces like, hey, get off the phone, but it's just not. Then it's fine to step aside and have a prayer, a personal prayer, or something like that. So the language is all about, well, if somebody's doing this, then somebody else can do that. And this kind of plays off on like, there's no such thing as secular, because, whether it's the, Harry Potter Club or the Future Farmers of America or the Gender Sexuality Alliance, there's a leading of people towards, or the Christian Club at lunchtime. There's a leading of people towards a goal or something higher, so to speak.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, well, what club isn't religious?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I know, of course, that not true, because I'm talking about, like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. But I think all that is awesome, because if a school is going to be that open, I think that's great. To be like, you can have that diversity, you can have all these different kinds of clubs, to where there's not any flack or any discrimination against one above another. It's like, no, if you want to have whatever, an Atheists of America club, great. If you want to have a We Love Jesus club, great. It's the freedom to do either or, and that's really cool. But what I don't know if this has ever happened at your school or not, but like some of the things where policies in the school start to go into play that go against. I have a friend who is dealing with the locker room situation right now in a school in town, not the one you work at, a different one, in a different, I can't remember if it's a junior high, or I think it's a junior high, where basically his daughter came home and told him there's a boy that's changing with the girls in the locker room. So my friend just U-turn, went back, asked to talk to the principal. Says, yes, is your policy allow for boys to be in the girls' locker room changing with the girls? And the principal says, no, of course not. And he's, well, my daughter just told me that so-and-so, and he said the name. is allowed in there, and the principal says, "Oh, well, she goes by this name, and in our records, she's a female."
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let's say something like that exact scenario happens at the school you work at. How do you handle something like that? Is that one of those, like...
Well, I run scenarios through my mind in preparation for things, and that isn't one because I don't do PE.
Okay.
So I haven't run that scenario, and so I don't know...
And your kids don't go there, so it's not like they would be dealing directly with that, so...
Yeah.
Right.
That's another thing. Is But you're talking about, like, the workplace, so...
Yeah.
So... there's certain scenarios that I've run through my mind, and I think the only one that might affect my work field would be names and things like that. It would be name preferences, and pronoun preferences.
Yeah.
I haven't really had a situation that's arised where I need to well, I have had a little bit, but I just feel that I don't want to be involved.
I don't think any of us do.
So,
but they make us be involved sometimes,
I've never been forced to be involved, but I have heard of situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, so let's see. First of all, COVID was weird for this because I never saw so many transitional gender moments than on Zoom, because that was an opportunity for people to put in a name. Right. And even that's when the revolution of pronouns within your email signature got really popular within education, And so, but teaching was just bizarre during that time anyway, because it was like, hey, everybody, and half of them are like laying in their beds and stuff like that.
So did you do that? You taught remotely?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not... Everything was bizarre during that time. So now that it's like, okay, back to normal, and we're having this revolution continue.
Mm-hmm.
I basically just go off of what it says on the document, right?
Okay.
And so my default is, I'm just a teacher. I'm going to follow the rules of what this document says, and I don't know if, because sometimes there's like guy names that sound like girl names and girl names sound like guy names.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say what it says right here.
It's Pat, right, from SNL back in the day.
And I'm going to and I don't really use honestly, I don't even use pronouns all that much anyway.
Who does? Yeah, exactly.
Hey Steve, come here for a second. Yeah, it's like, honestly, you don't really. There's not a lot of situations.
It's usually only if you're talking to another person about, hey, can you go tell her to
and
do
honestly,
this?
I'm so used to saying the student when I'm talking to other colleagues that it doesn't really arise.
Right.
And so, anyway, this is a child under the age of 18.
Yep.
And if you've ever named somebody, which both of us have, that's a very important and influential decision.
Yep.
And therefore, the person that put that name inside of that government document, I'm talking about when I pull up the name on the screen, it's got this picture of the student's face and the name next to it, right?
Yeah.
Right. I didn't put that there.
Right.
The student didn't put that there. Us parent put that there.
Yeah.
When they were a freshman and they enrolled them.
Right.
And so what I say to the student is, I don't have the ability to change that.
Okay, so if they say, I know that my parents named me Harvey, but I want to start going by
so-and-so.
Rainbow Sprinkle or something.
Saying, okay, go ahead and go out to administration. They can change that for you, and whatever it says, I'll just say that, right?
And
so
is that just a scenario in your head, or have you ever had to deal with that?
One time.
One time, okay.
Yeah, one time, and I was just like, go to the registrar. They can change that for you.
Was the student upset with you?
No.
Okay.
Because honestly, I think it's the truth. Like I'm not gonna I stopped using, or I'm trying my best to not use nicknames anymore, because sometimes it's like Steve-O, right?
Right.
But wait a second. No, that's wrong. The parents named them Steve, not Steve-O.
Right.
Right. And it would be wrong of me to go against. That's who has a government authority over that student.
Right.
The parent is, until they're 18 or over, right? And so me, the principal, anybody doesn't make that decision. It's the person that named them and the person that has the rights over that particular STEVE.
Yeah.
Right.
But what if it's something like Michael and he goes by Mike? It's like a nickname. It's not like Steve-O. Like that's more like a, hey, we're buddies.
Yeah, I'm just
but like
trying
something like Mike
because
Matt.
Of the times, I'm trying not to do that anymore.
So you would call them Michael because that's what it would say.
I'm trying my best.
Okay.
I'm trying my best. It's so ingrained in me to go Mike or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying my best to keep it like that.
Okay.
And it's hard for me because sometimes I'm very much like a bros in it kind of teacher.
Yeah.
But
like, what if the student goes to the registration and the parents are involved and they allow them to change their name in the books to Rainbow Sprinkle?
Yeah.
Do you have no problem calling them that?
I have no problem calling Rainbow Sprinkle. Because my MO, or my decision that I've already made, is to respect the parents.
Okay.
And if I do that, then I feel like I don't have blood on my hands.
Yeah.
If they made the wrong... I don't want to make the wrong decision.
Sure, right.
I want them to make the wrong decision.
Right.
Right? And then I can have a clear conscience.
But there's times as a teacher, as being an influence in their life, as having these children that are minors in your care for part of their day, to where obviously, and if the parents are making certain bad decisions, you would feel the need to step in. Like it'd always be a duty to step in. Like let's say the kid was continually coming to school with bruises or black eyes or something. It appeared to be coming from abuse at home, right? Eventually, as a teacher, you would probably be compelled to maybe look into the situation.
I'm mandated to do it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. But so in that situation, wouldn't be like, well, I'm just trusting the parents, right? You'd be like, no, I don't know if I can trust the parents. It seems to me like maybe they're being abusive to their child, I know that's a far extreme, but...
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but it's like this. I don't want myself or my classroom to be the place where that decision is made, where very often there will be a teacher with a rainbow flag out front and a safe space on their door.
Yeah.
And this becomes the transitional turning point for where they can now experiment and have a new identity in front of their peers. And then later, when they're in their 20s, they'll tell their parents that, hey, I've been doing this for so long, right?
Yeah.
So, I made a lot of bad decisions when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a good possibility that they're going to, go do something, feel some way sexually in high school, and then a completely different way sexually in college. A different way.
It's almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just... Like I said, my MO, my default, the way I'm navigating this, you mentioned your friend in the locker room. I'm just saying this is how I'm doing it right now, is I'm trying to just be an English teacher and remove myself from any type of something that has to do with sexuality or sexual
As you
decisions.
should be.
Right?
As you should be. That is not any teacher's job as far as I'm concerned.
So
whether it's
following what it says on the roll is my way of doing that right now. I'm just going to read what it says right here.
Right.
Now, if I was forced into a situation where there was a policy where they said, you got to stop doing that. You have to have on the first day of campus, first day of school, listen, guys, I know this is what it says, but sometimes your parents make mistakes. What do you guys all want me to call you? Okay, I'm going to jot it down. What's your name? Okay, what's your name? But what do you want to go by? Okay, right.
What's
so
your
let's say I was
pronouns?
forced into that.
Right.
Then I think I would say, what grade do you want? I mean,
yeah.
What are you feeling?
Right.
Because
exactly.
There's a grade on here.
Yes.
There's a name on here, but because I'm gonna turn this in, right?
Yeah.
But I want to know what you guys feel like.
It'd be just straight A's straight across the board, man.
Well, maybe some people want to transition to an F or something.
Maybe. I doubt it, but that would be kind of a weird way to go, but possible.
Yeah. And also, I feel that government students and government staff, employees also should have the same ability to be flexible.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel that I feel that I have been working as a school teacher for 30 years, not 10 years, and I would like my retirement.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I'm fully vested.
Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to begin.
But they'll deny that request for some weird reason.
But I'd like to collect.
Exactly.
I'd like to collect my retirement.
Okay, so one last thing I want to say about this.
Sorry for being sarcastic.
No, hey man,
this is an issue that's very sensitive to people. And
it is, but sarcasm is fun.
Comical moment for a second, maybe.
But you know what though, the whole situation. Yes, it's a serious situation to a lot of people, but it is also very comical if we're being honest. It's ridiculous. Like some of the things that are happening in our country is absolutely ridiculous. To where, anyway. The one thing I wanted to say is something that you just mentioned a minute ago, and I wanted to kind of get your take on it, like kind of where you stand. You had mentioned the other, let's say like another classroom that has the rainbow flag in a safe space, and that's where maybe the student feels open to go by, say it's a biological male, and they have decided that they're going to now live as a female, and they're going to go by a different name. They're going to be called he, she, the whole deal. And they're doing that all at the school. And you mentioned like somewhere later on in their 20s, that's where they tell their parents, oh, by the way, I've been living this way for 10 years. This happens, right? This is a real scenario. Mm-hmm. This happens quite a bit to where the parents are kind of being left out of the loop when it comes to that stuff. And the reason being given is because, well, the students informed us that you are not very open at home to this possibility of them being transgender or living this lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So our job is to protect the student, and in this case, we're protecting them from their parents by not telling you.
The state knows what's right. Yeah.
Correct. So, I mean, do you see that as right, or do you think that the parents should always be involved with stuff like that? Like, should the parents be notified if their child decides at school to start going by a different gender or going by even a different name? Let's say it's not even gender related. They're just like, my name's John, but I want people to start calling me Matthew. I mean, do you think parents should be involved in those kind of things? Or do you think the school should just keep whatever, just keep what happens at school stays at school kind of thing,
Yeah, parents should be notified.
Okay.
Parents should be informed about a lot of things. And that's one of them.
Okay.
So yeah, clear communication. But if a student gets in a fight, mm-hmm. And hurts themselves and somebody else, they are notified. Mm-hmm. But like you said, if a student is having moments of gender identity and sexual exploration, and is then they typically are not. Well, they are not. The parent is not notified. Right. So that is just a moral understanding of what is politically correct or seen as right and wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So we both believe that Scripture says you're not to harm other people, right?
Yeah.
And then we also believe that Scripture says that you're supposed to have sexual purity, and there's specific ways that you're meant to have your body sexually and stuff like that. Right. So one is, in the 2 examples I gave, one is violence. The student was being violent. So right now, yes, the state does agree that harming somebody else is wrong. And then the other one is a certain way of conducting your body sexually, and that's not one that currently the state sees wrong. And so
so if 2 kids were having sex, like caught having sex on campus, obviously the parents are going to be notified.
For that one, probably, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Probably that one,
Okay. I would hope so. I mean, I would hope so. That's something that the parents should probably know about. But it's the same kind of scenario, because I think for most, not all, but I would imagine most parents, when they get that phone call, we caught your daughter in the back doing such and such with this boy or whatever the case is, or we caught your son doing this. I think that's going to be a pretty hostile, maybe not hostile is the wrong word. They're not going to go home to flowers and a cake on the table for them. They're going to be in some pretty big trouble with their parents, I would imagine. I'm sure there are some parents.
How about this hypothetical, since you're doing them?
Yeah. I'm the king of hypotheticals, man.
What if there was, in the storage closet, a homosexual couple engaging in acts.
Okay.
And then down the hall there was a heterosexual couple, guy and girl, engaging in acts.
Okay.
Right? So you told me, like, well, hey, you know what? If there was 2 students doing this, the parents would probably be called.
Yeah.
But what if they were homosexual? I wonder if there would be some hesitancy to inform, because they need to protect this sort of like sort of secret.
Because that would probably be harder for the parents to. I mean, both of those, getting either one of those phone calls is not going to be a happy situation for most parents. To hear that your junior high school kid or whatever is engaging in sexual acts with anybody is going to be hard. But then also to be told, oh, by the way, it appears that your son is gay.
Yeah. Unless it's the year 2055 and they're like, hey, listen, we caught your son with a girl. Yeah, when we're so far removed from that, you mean? Yeah, but I'm not sure if the population would continue if it got that on.
No, it wouldn't. Well, it's kind of not. Well, although they do say that men can have babies now, so. But what they mean is, trans men.
So, I thought you meant AI.
No.
Not
That's a whole nother story there. So I have quite a few things here that I kind of jotted down as we were talking that kind of have to do with spirituality in areas I want to go with you. Some areas that I haven't really gone with anybody before, which is going to be kind of fun.
Oh, good. Make it unique,
Yeah, and I got a little bit kind of your testimony in a sense, right? Like you. I guess I'll jumpstart us to this. Like, at what point in your life do you feel like you got saved? Would you say that was after college or prior to? Because you kind of talked about how like you kind of were a believer, but you didn't really feel like you were, sold out for the Lord, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, such a tricky question.
Yeah.
Because Romans 10:9, confess and believe to be saved.
Yeah. But believe in your heart.
Yeah.
That's the kicker. Yeah.
So, confessing and believing in my heart on a missionary trip sophomore year of high school. Very similar situation to what you had mentioned, just going to youth group for social reasons. I was going to this youth group because it was a cool thing to do on a Wednesday night, and pizza and basketball and things that. And so there was a spring break, Easter vacation, go to Mexico with a big busload of people, and what a blast that is. Through Azusa Pacific University would host it, and you'd stay in tents and things like that.
That's awesome.
And a very faithful, awesome youth leader. Reminds me a lot of Dan, but a very humble guy, but very persistent and loving guy named Alex Wright that would just talk to me and was like, he knew that I wasn't from a Christian home, and so chatting about that, and like, you need to kind of just decide if you want to do that. I mean, you hanging around, what's going on?
Yeah, well, why were you even involved with those people to begin with? Like, did a friend of yours invite you to a youth group?
I lived across the street from a evangelical family with 7 kids, and I was a quote-unquote only child, only because there's a 12-year gap, and I was very much the baby. So, when I was born, my siblings were in high school, and when I was in kindergarten, they were in junior college.
Oh, crazy.
And I have a niece that's older than me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Same 2 parents, though?
Uh-huh.
So you were kind of like
my mom had a lot of kids young,
surprise.
and in the 40s, me, right?
Okay,
So,
yeah.
So anyway, only child in that way, and so go across the street, and wow, look at all these friends, and they're having their little family devotional, and picture Jesus on the wall and stuff like that, and so that was the initial introduction, and my mom even recalls this story where the father of that family said, Danny, do you believe in God? And I said, yeah, Zeus.
That's awesome. What an answer.
Yeah. I had
love it.
Coloring books with Greek mythology in them.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? That was like a neat thing, along with dinosaur coloring books and stuff like that. And so...
that's great.
Anyway, just hanging out with those guys. That was the church that they went to, that eventually became that youth group. Although the teen years of going to that youth group and the introduction of that family was a large separation of adolescence between those 2 times. Although apparently I did go to that church as a very young child with that family, and somebody said that I went forward or something, but I have no recollection of that.
Oh, like an altar call kind of thing?
Yeah, but it was like a Sunday school, wave your hands if you love Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I have no memory of that. You know what I mean? And so, of course, all of this journey has the caveat of Ephesians 1, before the foundations God chose me, right? Okay. So if you're asking for a testimony, it can't leave out God's sovereignty and how he rescued me, right? So again, with the I statements, I went to this church, I went on a youth group, I accepted Christ, right? So that is a big side bubble, but and then
so what did your parents think about that, though? Like, when you, because they were not religious, they were totally fine with it, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have siblings that are doing all kinds of different things and with spirituality and stuff like that, and that's and they have a thumbs up to it. I mean, they don't have anything bad that they're thumbs upping, so to speak, right? But they are just always like, oh, great, you know what I mean? Right, we're rooting for you.
Yeah,
that's just kind of
you found your truth. We're happy for you, kind of thing.
Yeah, it wasn't even that statement, because that particular statement has a relativistic tone to it.
Oh, it totally does.
There's many truths.
That's my point.
That was never really like a part of the conversation.
Yeah. It
was always just like, I'm going to youth group, cool.
Yeah.
Right? There was never any like, well, what do you believe? Like, okay, that's cool that you believe that. Right. There was never like a conversation about it.
Right.
It was always like, that's our kid. We love him.
Yeah.
Do your thing, buddy.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So, anyway,
So you're kind of like me in the sense that you can't really, because I can't really pinpoint a moment. Like a lot of people, like, oh, when did you get saved? Oh, I got saved on October 27th at 6:45 p.m. in this building with these people. I prayed a prayer and I did, which is fine. I'm not against that. I'm just saying I can't do that. For me, it was gradual.
Factors that were moments of influence. Like I'm saying to you, that time in Mexico in the missionary trip and sanctification. Certainly in college, I went my first 2 years of college is I'm ready for drug, sex, and rock and roll. Yay, liberty.
That's right.
And then
the American dream.
And then I really believed that there was a revival movement at Cal Poly at the time, because there upstairs, I think it's called Mott Auditorium, which is the upstairs in the UU. Man, Campus Crusade was just so massive back then, which they're not right now as big. Right. And
the founder passed, didn't he?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think he did.
And people witnessing on campus and like worship circles and the thing, I was like, and I kind of saw it as like, oh, cool, like people are, college is like, there's some Christians in college. I didn't know that. But now that I look back on it, it's like, that was a movement,
Yeah.
And I remember people witnessing to me and giving my surface level, I just kind of have my toes in the water, sort of like Christian responses in the prompting of their questions. I remember Campus Crusade at one point had this campaign called 10,000 Years, which I think is sparked off of a worship song.
10,000 Reasons. Yeah. 10,000 years
and forevermore.
Yeah.
And they would lead off with the icebreaker. Well, where will you be in 10,000 years? And they had these little shirts called 10,000 Years, you know. And I couldn't and it was kind of came to like, well, I think I'm saved. You're saved. And I remember having this conversation as like this, awesome young college evangelical was chatting with me, and so those all were important, but it really sanctification didn't come solidly until I lived with other Christian guys. Right. So that was a turning point. Mercy Church, which used to be called the Burn, and I've started going there and becoming really involved in that, and they did a great job and still are fantastic to this day of pursuing people in the small group environment, where you can really sit down with people in a home group, in a home room, and like you're living with these guys, and I had this guy I was living with who was already engaged. He was 22, so much conviction and caring for his fiance, just so fruit, so much fruit, it was that you don't really, that was just so impactful. It was like, wow, so anyway, I moved into a house of Christian guys. So really that was the sanctification part. So when we're talking well, when did James, faith without works is dead, James, when did that aspect where I could say that I didn't have a dead faith was when I was able to kind of walk it out, and those became the same guys that I went off to drove through Costa Rica and El Salvador and Nicaragua and all those with those guys, with those buddies. Yeah.
Cool, man. So you use words a few times now, like sanctification and sovereign, and so are you of the Reformed kind of viewpoint, or consider yourself a Calvinist, or
those are words that everybody uses.
I know.
Right.
I know. I knew you were going to say that.
But Yeah.
Which answers my question.
I did use the word. I did use the word. I did use the word reform when I came to the rap group that I like.
Yes. Yes.
So.
That's true. Many Christians use those words, but in my experience, it's mostly Calvinists that use the terms justification and sanctification.
Well, especially if a guy's giving their testimony and they quote Ephesians 1, I was chosen before the foundations. That could be a giveaway.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think you'd have to kind of go through different points of doctrine because I'm a collectivist. I'm sorry, I'm a continualist.
Okay.
That was a political term. I'm a continualist. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not a cessationist. I do not think that the works have ceased.
Okay.
So
the gifts, you mean? The gifts
of the Spirit. The works.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. The gifts of the Spirit, healing and prophecy, and all of those things.
Sure.
Tongues. So continualist. So that's a little bit different because I think wouldn't it be that would be a non-reformed thing sometimes.
Could be. I mean, yeah, there's many different sects
yeah.
of Calvinist doctrine.
So
and
we
stuff,
have to dance around your question a little bit because.
Well, I guess would you identify as a 5-point Calvinist or no?
Until I started thinking about one is Molinism.
Mm-hmm.
Till I started thinking more about Molinism and the concept of time and God being outside of time.
Yep.
I would say that would have been true maybe a year ago.
Okay.
A little bit more. So how
has that changed?
I think as far as Tulip goes, I think I would say yes. I am in agreement with if we went through those, the total depravity, et cetera,
right.
even perseverance of the saints, yes.
Yeah.
And maybe you have the acronym memorized and we could go through that. I would probably go with on all of those because I feel like in my mind I can extract proof text scriptures for each one of those.
Sure.
If I wanted to, and I'm trying to have a biblical mind, and so yes.
Yeah. But to even go through those, like with an Arminianist and a Calvinist, go through the tulip, even then, because I have a really good friend who's a I'm not a Calvinist, by the way, but I have a really good friend who is. But I agree with some of the points. I'm definitely not a 5-point, but I also don't really consider myself Arminianist either. I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. But what I find is that even as you go through the tulip, like you take total depravity, it's like, okay, and what my Calvinist friend will explain what total depravity means to him. Because we might both say, oh yeah, total depravity all the way, totally, for sure.
Original sin. Right?
But then as we start to describe what we mean by that, we might be on totally different poles with that. Like, that's what you mean? No, I don't think that. And we get into all that. But I mean, I think the irresistible grace, is the big one, right? That's the one. Or limited atonement, I guess, is another. Just the whole idea of determinism and the idea that really a person really has no input, no say-so in their salvation at all. Really, they have no. It's all nothing but God choosing who's going to be saved, and if you're one of the chosen, fantastic. If not, so sorry, or whatever. I think that's what most people opposed to Calvinism have a hard time with, and it's not just because it's a hard doctrine to grasp as far as like the character of who God is. I mean, even a lot of Calvinists would agree with that. Yeah, it is kind of a hard doctrine, but they think that's what it says. But I also don't see a whole lot of scriptural support for it. So that's kind of where I stand on that. But me and my buddy, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I think that's. I think if you took irresistible grace, for example, and then we're like, okay, and then if we opened up a Bible, which we don't have time to do and stuff like that,
right,
and we would look at certain verses and we would both say, yes, that's right. And then we might have different ways to try to think about and explain how that's right.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Right.
Ephesians 1 is true for me and true for you.
Yeah.
Right. But I might say, oh, wow, that's amazing. Here's how I think it happens. Mm-hmm. And then you would say, wow, that's amazing.
Right.
Here's how I think it happens.
Yeah.
And so that's why things like the concept of God being outside of time and Molinism, mm-hmm. They both can work. They probably can both work for both of us.
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? And so.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's such a debatable topic, and that's one of the things I've always said. Like, if the scriptures were explicitly clear one way or the other on free will or determinism, there could really not be a debate, because it would be like, well, no, this scripture says it plainly right here. You Arminius, so either you believe this, and somebody like James White might have that approach.
Yeah.
Like, say, no, this is exactly what it says. You either take that as scripture or you just leave scripture.
Yeah.
But to me, there's no definitive like verses that just are so blatantly, oh, well, obviously that's determinism. Like, salvation is determined by God from the get-go. There's no say-so for man. You know what I mean? Like, people don't debate whether or not Jesus is the only way. Christians don't debate whether or not Jesus is the only way of salvation. Mm-hmm. Because Jesus very plainly said that, right? There's really no other way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
But with the Calvinist debate, there's verses that can be kind of like pushed on either side, right? So, well, this verse, look at it, seems to say we have free will in salvation. Oh, but this verse seems to say that God chooses who gets saved and who doesn't. So it's like,
yeah,
okay,
And I'm not very good at well, I've gotten better, but I'm not very good at having a camp, and I love scripture so much that well, this is mostly true when it comes to like eschatology. Mm-hmm. I've not landed in eschatology, right?
Okay.
Right. So the last person that I listen to is the person I say amen to. That's how influenceable
right.
I am.
Right.
In eschatology, like,
right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's man, this guy was really convincing.
Yeah.
That. That the bad things that happened in Revelations are talking about the fall of Jerusalem,
right?
That's what Jesus predicted was all of these, and he was warning those people at that age, which is post-millennial, right?
Sure,
right. And then we're going into okay, well, if it's not for them, it's for us. But are we taken away first? Or are we going to experience these things, right? Which has to do with the trib, pre, post, right? Mm-hmm. So I haven't landed on that one, but I'm a little bit more emotionally involved in soteriology, mm-hmm. because it has to do with me,
right? And
my what God did in my life,
yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a much more important topic than end time stuff. You know what I mean? Like, well, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, the salvation of a person
is closer. It's you know what I mean? Like, we're talking about our testimony and stuff like that, and then like, well, how did that go down? That's part of like your thought process when you talk about the testimony. So I think that's why I can emotionally land a little bit more Calvinistic, mm-hmm. and because it has to do with life, and like, wow, isn't that amazing how I was rescued and da-da-da, and then it's just not a season. Maybe I'll have a season where I read Acts chapter 2 and Peter calls people to repentance, and he's like, everybody that choose, or Joshua, choose this day who he will serve, right? Or in Acts chapter 2, Peter's like, who wants to follow Christ?
Right.
Make the decision right now.
Yeah.
And it certainly seems like, wow, there's just people deciding right there.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of the gospel is like that, right?
Sure.
Also,
Sure.
Right. And so maybe that's why somebody might have those particular concepts that have to do with a choice and a decision, and because they have a testimony where it's like, on January 30th, I went down and I threw my drugs away and I because it's like, wow, it really just does. That verse impacts them, and so that might be why soteriologically they lean that way. But however, I told you about my father passed away 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
A couple days before we found out that he was ill and he was in the ER.
It was sudden then. It wasn't like he had been sick for a long time.
He was just a little bit fragile, but it was certainly like it's sped up towards the end there.
Okay.
The Christian club that we have on campus that I help facilitate with is called Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's a big thing, and they have groups where teachers and coaches can have a morning breakfast and have some fellowship time, and different coaches will speak and different people, and it's really neat. A little fellowship breakfast before school starts.
Yeah.
Guest speaker of that day. Now, typically, when you have a guest speaker in a room with people with lots of different churches coming together, the message is relatively encouraging and not sectarian, leaning to one sort of way.
Yeah.
But anyway, this guy comes up and he's like, all right, we're going to activate the Spirit right now. We're going to, call things that aren't into action. We're going to cast away some of these, negative thoughts and fears.
This is another one of the teachers doing this?
Yeah.
Okay.
A guest speaker guy. I died, and when I was sort of flatlined, I had a visitation, demonic entities, but I called on these angels, and you need to have your voice tone in prayer be so on and so forth. Here's the dimension we're in now, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff that has vocabulary that's not in my wheelhouse necessarily, right? You know what I mean? And it might be if you go to like Every Day or something like that. I'm just trying to think of like a church that it is a little bit more what would be called is like a charismatic denomination, right? So I'm like, okay, what can I learn from this, and is it true, right?
Yeah.
And so
and how do you determine that?
Yeah. So I was like, raise my hand, like, okay, so what do you mean when you mean dimension, etc., stuff like that. Missler, I need to remember that name later. Missler?
Chuck Missler?
Yeah, okay, so that's where I'm going. So, and are you talking about Paul going into the certain heavens, like, because I understand, like, I'm trying to like filter through my mind for a proof text for this guy talking about a dimension, like, okay, because that is usually a sci-fi term, right? And I'm trying to make sure that me and my brothers aren't getting some wacko teaching, you know what I mean? Right. And so,
as you should be on guard always.
And so I was talking to the guy, and And I'm like, are you talking about, what did Paul, like this, Paul talked about layers of heaven and things like that.
Yeah. He's caught up to the third heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, or Paul says, I knew a guy that was, he talks to himself in the third person, right?
Right. That's what I think.
Yeah.
There are some that don't believe that, but
yeah. And so, he's like, okay, let's chat later. I'm like, awesome. You know, we exchange numbers.
Oh, nice.
And we're texting back and forth. And so he gives this testimony where he, in a unconscious, comatose, near flatline, in and out state, has visitations with Christ. And then, 3 days later, my dad is in that, and I'm going to visit him in the hospital.
Wow.
And so obviously, as a believer, I'm going to pray that he has experiences he's in a partial conscious kind of way. Right. You know what I mean? Which I know people can have even inside of dreams and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, my faith is challenged 3 days before. Like, is this possible? This guy's saying it. And like, okay, well now I'm texting him back and forth about this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so he sends me some Chuck Missler information, right? And so now I'm like really thinking about how all of soteriology, Calvinism, and Arminianism really has a whole nother outlook if you're thinking, because a lot of it has to do with time, sovereignty, and when somebody is saved has the word when in it, W-H-E-N. Yeah. Right? Like, well, when did this, well, if we're removing our minds from the and now I'm using the word dimension of time, then that kind of puts a whole spin on, like, if we were going to have a conversation about prevenient grace versus like grab you grace or different stuff like that, because it kind of has to do with when somebody makes a decision versus all kinds of stuff like that. Right?
Yeah.
So, I'm learning about this, and, they're giving examples of like, okay, so all the angles of a triangle equal 180 degrees, right? And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes they don't. And I'm like, oh, okay. And well, if it's on a flat plane, they all equal 180. But you put that across the surface of the Earth, which is a three-dimensional thing, then they would very easily all equal more than 180 degrees, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so now I'm thinking about going from 2D to 3D, all kinds of other interesting examples that you could think about this kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so God is spirit, right? Yeah. Doesn't operate in 1D, 2D, or 3D. Nope. Right?
All the Ds.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is just a recent mental homework project for me. Yeah. Where I need to figure out how does this new perspective of and I'm still looking into Molinism, but I think Molinism says both to everything, because somehow you can have a door that says whoever wills may enter, and then you open the door and go in, and there's a banquet table, and there's a place at the banquet table that already has your name written on it. Yeah. So our minds say that's impossible, right? But that's kind of how the Bible plays it out.
That's pretty much my stance.
Yeah. is, well, that was both, right?
Yes.
Because the name was written on it and it was your choice to open it.
Yeah.
The only way that could really, well, I'm not going to say the only way because maybe...
Well, because you're dealing with time. God already knows who's going to
thing.
open that door, but that doesn't mean that God's making whoever opens that door open the door.
So somehow this door and this banquet table is not in my three-dimensional wheelhouse.
Right.
Or my brain, right? So, we could have a wonderful conversation about... different verses and how they play it out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think we might just be kind of like spinning our buckles.
Well, that is really the only way to, as far as I'm concerned, that's really the only way to get to the bottom of something like that, or not. But at least get to the bottom of it to the point of saying, well, you know what, Scripture is not explicitly clear on this subject, so we can never really know for sure until the Lord tells us personally when we meet Him someday in heaven. So, I'm not really that concerned about it. It's not that big of an issue, right, as far as the real grand scheme of things. But that is the way that I would approach it, as far as we all have the same scriptures, at least Christians do. And we have the ability, we have the resources to dig into that as much as we would like, however much time we want to put into that. If we want to, and this is kind of something else I had written down here, because I know you're an English teacher, and we had talked about, you said you were interested in language and words and that kind of thing. Have you ever done any studies into like Greek or Hebrew or like anything like that when you're studying like the Bible?
No.
Okay.
No. And sometimes when I say I'm interested in words, and the beauty of that, I think sometimes I just mean a beautifully crafted sentence or a perfect like paragraph that ties it all together and is succinct. Okay. And then also strangely like fonts.
Okay.
Like, isn't that a beautiful font that just lays out perfectly?
That seems to be a big
some of it has
thing,
to do with design.
Okay.
Right. And so.
Yeah. But I mean, and I came to this point years ago myself, is because I've always had a skeptic mind. Still do. I still consider myself to be a skeptic with everything. I'm always asking questions. Used to drive my parents crazy when I was a kid, even before Christianity was even a part of my life. I was like, why? But why? Like, what's the reason for that? What's the reason? And then as I got older and people invite me to Bible studies, and I ask all these questions like, well, how can Jesus say He's the only way? That seems narrow-minded to me. I don't think that's very not nice. You're telling me that this kid who grows up as a Muslim or grows up as a Hindu or whatever is going to go to hell because he doesn't believe in your Jesus? He didn't have a parent. I have all these questions. Skeptic. So then I become a Christian. Well, then I started studying the scriptures a lot, and I'm reading all these, first of all these translations. Then I'm reading all the commentaries, and this guy says this verse means this, and this other guy says this verse means something different. And I kind of got to this point where I'm like, how can I ever really come to a solid conclusion on what the Bible really says about these certain issues, these certain things? And then a friend of mine who was similarly minded as me started telling me about this Greek class he was taking. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then I eventually went to that, and that just blew my mind. And then we ended up going out to the church that pastor who taught that class he was a pastor of a church. We went out to that church for like 12 years. So anyway, my point is, for me, that answered a lot of those questions. Not all of them, obviously. But again, sometimes the answer is, okay, I've dug down as far possible as I can into this text, through context, through the original languages, through whatever. And the answer is, we don't know. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because at least I know we can't know that answer or whatever. Because the Bible doesn't give you every answer to every question there is to ask. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Scripture is sufficient.
Correct.
It's not...
Yes. It's not all encompassing. Exhaustive. Yeah, exactly. And somebody said at one time, like, the Bible tells us everything God wants us to know, not everything there is to know. Right? Like, that's different. That's a different topic altogether. If I want to learn about wombats, I'm not going to find that in the scripture. I can go get a science book from the library, and it's going to tell me all about wombats. Yeah. But God doesn't want me to know about wombats. Sometimes you read things like,
why am I supposed to know about that?
That too. Right.
How to like build a tabernacle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. A lot of stuff in the Old Testament, right?
Could have just taken out that chunk
Yeah.
and put a little bit more about soteriology in there.
Right. Exactly.
Hey,
exactly. So, I mean, so that was a big thing for me. And a lot of those questions were answered, things that I had. A lot of these kind of stuff we're talking about, whether it's, things like predestination and election and these things that, a lot of debates when we were going to Calvary the first time, we were having people like David Hawking and David Hunt, would come and speak about how Calvinism is wrong, and so I was early in my Christian life, I was like, oh yeah, obviously that's bogus, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then I'm in a car one time on my way to a Promise Keepers event with some friends in San Jose, and this guy happened to be a Calvinist, like a strong Calvinist, and I had never really talked to one before. Mm-hmm. And he had me, I was still a young Christian at the time, I didn't know how to answer any of the things he was bringing up, and I was kind of like, wow, it sure sounds like this is true. Like these verses he's bringing up are very convincing, So then I would go home and then I started digging into those verses and be like, oh man, what's this really saying? And, so anyway, as I started to get into that, it was really helpful to kind of, it answered a lot of questions. Another one, and I wrote this down because you mentioned it, is spiritual gifts, right? The idea of spiritual gifts. And you said that you're a kind of person who believes that they're still being done today, which I would agree. Where we may or may not agree is on like the concept of what they are and who's doing them, right? Because I've been in a lot of churches where they kind of present it like, and I've even done this test, right? They give you the test. Take this test to find out what your spiritual gift is, right? It's like a personality test pretty much, Mm-hmm. And then once you figure out what that is or whatever the test tells you your spiritual gift is, they'll say, well, now you have to practice this gift. You have to get good at it so you can use it for the kingdom of God. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of that is biblical. I think that's all man-centered
the test
garbage.
Part because it's not biblical because you should already kind of know, or what do you mean?
No, because
because we've given.
I guess
we have the gift. Is that another? That's another argument against that. I guess.
Well, yeah, in a sense, I guess I should give a little more background on that. So one of the things that I learned through the original languages is that first of all, there's two words being translated gift. There's the most common one that we hear is charisma, right, where we get charismatic from. That's usually what's translated spiritual gift in English. Whenever you see spiritual gift in there, it's charisma. Then there's another word called dorea, which is a gift. It means a gift given to somebody. Like if I give you a Christmas present, right? I buy you a car. Here you go. It's yours. Now you take it from me. Now it belongs to you. I'm giving it to you. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. You can drive around with it. You can whatever. You can sell it to somebody else. It's yours. To where charisma just means, it literally means expression of grace. So that's all it means. So when you look in the scripture, the fascinating thing is the only gift, whenever you see that something that's the word dorea, like a gift given to the believer, is the Holy Spirit. Right? We're given the Holy Spirit, dorea. So now he's inside of us and he possesses us, right? Now anytime that Holy Spirit expresses himself through us, that's charisma. You see what I'm saying? So like if I'm somewhere and somebody's sick and the Lord just uses me to heal them and they get healed, that's charisma. I didn't do it. Right? It's the Holy. And now does that mean I need to start a healing ministry and start telling people, okay, I have the gift of healing, so everybody come forward. I'm going to start laying hands on everybody healing. No, because either God's going to do it or he's not. And whether I'm trying to make a business out of it or not is irrelevant, because he might use me to heal somebody one day. He might use me just to preach the gospel the next day. He might use me for something else. He might not use me for 3 years. It's all dependent on what he's doing, because again, he's sovereign and he knows what he's doing. He knows who's going to be around me, how they're going to be, what they need, if he's going to use me or not, right? So I mean, it's kind of a different concept to me. So when people say things like, oh, find out what your spiritual gift is, and if you've ever taken that test, it's basically just asking you what you like. Mm-hmm. Oh, do you enjoy talking to people about God? Sure. Do you enjoy getting deep into the scriptures? Yeah. Okay, well, you have the gift of evangelism and teaching. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's good because that's kind of what I want. It's like that fits right along with my personality, But that doesn't mean that God's going to use me to be a teacher or an evangelist, So
What if the survey were called "Find out what you like and start doing it"? And it didn't use that biblical terminology of gift.
That's what it should be called, because that's really what it is, in my opinion.
It's kind of like, hey guys, you're a Christian now. Use your gift, use your talent.
Your talent, sure.
Go do that.
Right. Like singing. Somebody has a beautiful voice, like on our worship team. Some of these people have beautiful voices, and I'm glad they're up there singing instead of me, because I don't have that kind of a beautiful voice. I'm not talented in that way, right?
Now there is something in Ephesians, I want to say 5. God gave some to be prophets, some to be pastors, some evangelicals for the building of this. Okay, I'm so bad. It's for the building of the body, for the work of the ministry, so we can all become mature or something like that. So I'm guessing that you would say that is
like a calling.
Those are offices, or those are,
in a sense,
leadership positions that doesn't talk about a movement of the Spirit. It's more like, hey, we need these roles in the church. Some people are going to be this thing, and some people are not going to be this thing.
I would call it a calling, right? That would be the Lord's called you into the ministry to be a teacher, and I think He does that. Obviously, I guess what I'm saying is, if let's say I decide one day, you know what I'm going to be? I'm going to be a pastor. So I'm going to go to Bible school, and I'm going to learn how to teach the scriptures. I'm going to learn here's what you're going to do. You're going to give your points. You're going to give your conclusion, how to craft a sermon, how to do all that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that per se, but what I'm saying is a human can do all of that and still have it not be the Lord.
Sure, yeah.
They can still get up there on a Sunday morning. They could even be leading a mega church and still not being used by the Lord. They're just, in their human effort, they're teaching the Bible, basically, or not.
There is roles. There is positions in today's church, and there is awesome works of the Spirit that can go through people. But it is not our leading Holy Spirit, so to speak. That's predominantly what we're seeing in Acts.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Holy Spirit is the one that's like, oh, you're going here, you're going there, you're going there, you're going to go.
Yep.
Which is a whole other topic, because that could be a good argument against papacy. Popal. Am I pronouncing this right?
Papacy.
Papacy. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, us, and because we're Protestants, we interpret.
Right.
You are on the rock on which I build my church. We would think that doesn't mean that Peter passes that down to the different popes and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but
so that's kind of the same thing of like, I'm going to do this action. I'm going to go to Bible school. Now I'm the pastor.
Right.
I'm going to be the appointed pope, and therefore now I'm the next guy that is the leader of Christ's church. On the planet Earth.
Right.
But
even that verse is another one that the original languages answered for me, because it says, like he says, you are Peter, like English, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, right? That's the English translation. But first of all, it's two different words for rock there, for Peter, because Petros means rock, right? That's what the word means, but it means like small stone or just rock, right? And then when Jesus says upon this rock, he's referring to like a foundation stone. And then there's that aspect, and then there's also I believe it's called I might be getting this wrong, but the concept is right. I think it's a reflexive pronoun, which means when he says upon this rock, the language shows that he's literally pointing to himself. He's not calling Peter the rock that the church is going to be built on. He's calling himself the rock that the church will be built on. And I got into a discussion with a Catholic about that one time, and he was like, "No, that's Peter was the first pope."
Yeah, we could probably bust out a couple more scriptures to attack that one if we wanted to. However, my father was Catholic, and another interesting thing is at his funeral, I got in touch with an old-time family friend who is my age that I hadn't seen since preschool.
Oh, wow.
Or I hadn't connected with since preschool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and during the, like, celebration of life, he's like, oh, and I've been going to St. Peter's. And I'm like, did I catch that right? Because maybe, as far as I thought, atheistic family. So it kind of caught me off guard. So I said, let's get coffee. Let's talk about it.
Nice.
Well, talk about life. But that was something I was curious about. And however, very genuine, heartfelt journey of faith, diving into the Bible, wanting fellowship, thinking through so many things, really on the same page in what I would call very important stuff, even soteriology and grace not works. Things that I would be like, are you gonna get a little culty on this one?
Right.
But no, I didn't get into transubstantiation because I was like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a big deal for me.
Yeah.
I don't even think anybody that goes up there like, I'm eating Christ.
Right.
Do they really think that? It's just like a old doctrine that somebody threw under the rug or something.
Right, yeah. The doctrine would say they believe that, but how many practicing Catholics actually believe that?
I'm just going to have some Christ now. Like, come on, give me a break, dude. And so I didn't even mess with that one because it's like, that's just a joke,
Yeah.
But everything else, and that was some solace for me.
Yeah.
Because, my dad was like, he's really into, he didn't always go.
Right.
But he was, that's where he stood his ground. Like, I'm Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a cool conversation to have with somebody that was on fire for the Lord.
Yeah.
Like
somebody from your past that you had no idea that was what was happening in their own life.
There's some good old fat and the priest that came in to do the last rites, hospital bed. I'm there with my siblings and stuff like that. He's breathing tubes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Comes in and homeboy is on point with the gospel.
Oh boy.
When he's doing his last rites, my dad comes
came to a little bit.
Like hadn't sat up.
Yeah.
And was sat up. Starts kind of like looking around.
Yeah, see.
And then the siblings start crying.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was like another kind of like really
that's
cool
so
moment.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean? That's amazing. You hear about that a lot, actually. That's kind of an amazing. I mean, to me, that's obvious, like God.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see how any atheists, of course, they'll try to explain stuff like that away in all kinds of different ways, but when it happens that often, like, someone's at the end of their life and the Lord kind of shows up either through a person or whatever, and that person that wasn't alert is also an alert, just to hear that one little thing
the
or
last
whatever.
rites and stuff,
It's fascinating to me. All right, well, if you got just a couple more minutes, I got one more topic we can bounce on.
I got a lot of minutes.
Yeah, so I kind of like to play devil's advocate in a sense and just be like, especially when I talk to people that are obviously not just Christians, but I mean, you seem pretty solid in your faith. Like you're pretty. You're not just the kind of guy who goes to church on Sundays. Like, you're talking about your family and the way that you raise your children, and it's very serious to you. You're not religious. You're following Christ to the best of your ability. And I like to kind of ask these questions that have been asked of me in the past, but just like as far as like things like apologetics kind of stuff, like if someone were to come up to you, let's say an old friend or an atheist you haven't talked to in forever, and they're like, now, Danny, why do you believe? I mean, there's so many different religions out there. There's all these different belief systems. Why do you believe that Christianity is the true way? Why do you hold so strongly to that? What would your response be? I mean, I know you can probably go.
Are you a theist already?
Or
are you?
That's a good question.
Are you an atheist, or are you an agnostic right now?
Let's say that as far as you know, the person is agnostic, but open. They're open to being convinced that Christianity is the true way. They just, at this point in their lives, don't really see any evidence to that.
You believe that there was a creator?
Let's say they believe in intelligent design.
Yeah.
Yes,
so,
but they're not calling it God. They're just saying, obviously, something created everything. Yes.
Yeah.
Something with intelligence.
Yeah. And the episode that I did listen to, you yourself said that this is trickier.
Okay.
Getting somebody from atheism to theism
is easy.
I think.
I think so too.
And that's why you didn't ask me that question.
Well, because I know you're already there, first of all. But
well, because that would be too easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I could do like the Kalam argument or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
And then it's like, oh, yeah.
Right. And I mean, and I am honestly convinced that anybody that doesn't at least hold to the intelligent design isn't thinking. I'm sorry to say it that way, but there's just way too much information now for us to just turn a blind eye and say, oh no, random chance.
Yeah.
There's no evidence at all to support random chance as far as I mean, everything around us
is order and
design and intelligence, and it has to be intelligent design. Now, that could be space aliens. Okay. It could be God. It could be an energy force. Whatever. But at least it's intelligent, something. And then we go from there. Yeah. So this is kind of from the point of someone who is... You're not trying to convince them so much that God exists, per se. You're trying to convince them that Christianity is the true way.
Well, there's apologists that could do a much better job at this than me, and
well, I'm sure.
I wish I could just press play on them.
Yeah.
But I would probably tackle it at reliability of the scriptures, and that has subpoints that I could do in a second. I would go with the resurrection. That's another separator. I could go with the drastic spiritual differences, specifically salvation through grace. I'll start with those three, and then maybe I'll think of another main point. Okay, I'll start with the easiest one for me, which would probably be the theological separation of Christianity as opposed to other religions, and that is an explanation of the gospel. And so humanity has a problem that's called sin. Sin is the breaking of God's laws, which all human beings have on their conscience, and these moral laws are not created by our culture or our developed group think, but they are pertinent on every heart of every person, whether you are tall, fat, thin, Asian, black, any time period. You do not want your things stolen. You do not want someone to lie to you. You do not want to hurt others or murder.
Sure.
Right? So there are others such as monogamy and
like universal moral code kind of thing.
Universal moral code, right? So you have broken those laws, and we could have a Ray Comfort conversation to try to get you to admit that, but we'll bypass that for now.
Right here.
And,
thieving, adulterer at heart, a lying, thieving.
So I'm sure you already know all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then we would talk about Emmanuel, God with us, Christ coming down as the one that can rescue and remove that sin, because there needs to be a scapegoat or a punishment, because God is just, and so there has to be a payment made for your sin, and God is pure and holy, and you know that you're not. So to be with someone that is pure and holy, you need to have your sins removed. Every single one of them. You wouldn't ever drink Aquafina with 1% urine in it, because it's not pure, right? And so God's the same way. He desires purity. And so other religions have some type of man works, necessary actions that require that purification process, whether it's a prayer to Mecca a certain number of times a day, or it's required Hail Marys for some branches of Catholicism, or any type of reaching of a state of nirvana. And so those are all necessary requirements, something that the human being must do to have that purification and those wrong things, call it sin, removed. And so the answer to why Christianity is because all other roads are a impossibility for you, because there isn't a way for you to actively remove and do enough works to reach a perfect, wonderful God. Although some religions think that it's possible, that's why Joseph Smith, in his rewriting in the Book of the Mormon, changed Ephesians 2 and say, it is by grace that you are saved after you have done all that you can do.
Right.
And originally Ephesians 2 says, for it is grace that you are saved through faith,
not of yourselves.
Not of yourselves, and there's no works, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I wish I had I think it's called Nephi 2 or something, right? But you guys can look it up or something.
Yeah.
But,
in the Book of Mormon, you mean?
Yeah, in the Book of Mormon. It's I can't remember I want to remember that, because it's such a great description of. He's like, well, you know what, man, they just can't get it. You know what I mean? So Joseph put in those extra words. After all you can do, and so you talk. If you would talk to somebody that believes in that religion or any other religion that says that there are steps to achievement, the response would just be, well, have you done all you can do?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, the Jesus and doctrines.
Elder Joseph Smith, how many minutes did you pray this morning? 10. Well, could you have done 11?
Yeah.
Well, you're not saved because you didn't do all you can do.
Right.
Right. So that's the one.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the point you're making is that all the other religions have an element of you need to achieve. You need to do this. You need to, get to this level of whatever you want to call it before you can be accepted, before you can achieve greatness, before you can achieve spirituality or whatever in that religion, to where Christianity says, no, you can't do it.
Yeah.
You need to surrender and give your life to Christ.
God performs that act.
Right.
God comes down to be the rescuer.
Right.
Now, that's kind of half of an answer to your question, because your question was sort of like, prove to me that Christianity is true.
Yeah.
Whereas I kind of said, here how it's drastically different.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a step in the right direction.
Sure, it's set apart as a unique...
Because a big argument is like, well, they're all the same, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
right. And
all roads lead to heaven.
Really not true at all.
Right.
That they're all the same.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one would be, and I think I'm going to go in like the order of like my ability to
go for it, man.
Sorry, what was the other one? Sufficiency, or the reliability of Scripture.
Yeah, which to me, before you go into that, and I'm glad you're going into that, to me that's a huge one. Because, like, for a Christian, whenever you're going to talk to somebody about the Lord, obviously most of the stuff we're going to be saying, other than the personal experience that we've had, is going to be coming from the Scripture. So the obvious critique of that from a non-believer would be like, yeah, but that's just from your old 1,000-year-old book. Like, how do I even know that's true? It's just written by a bunch of people one day that decided they want to control people and make money. I mean, we've sure we both heard this argument in many different forms. And that was an argument I used to use before I was a Christian too. It's like, you can't trust that book. What do you? All you Christians keep doing is reading from that book. How do you even know that book is true? So to me, if we're going to be pulling stuff from this book, it's pretty stinking important that we make sure that it's accurate and true, right?
Yeah.
So
you're not sounding like an unbeliever right now.
I'm not. Yeah. Well, it's hard for me to play that role. You know? I'm not a very good actor.
Yeah, and so if you want to leave your fictitious role, you can, to help me, because you went to that recent apologetics conference, I know, and so maybe you're pretty good at
I did. It was great too, by the way.
So and that's why this one is trickier for me, at least on the spot, because it has specific facts and figures about the reliability of Scripture, number of New Testament documents.
Yep.
You know, okay, so you guys believe Shakespeare, but let's compare this. You guys believe Plato, so let's compare this. It's a vast, right? So that is a statistical number in a history that shows, right? And then you've got what is that term that they use when it comes to plausible deniability? Would that be it? So the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the same, but not exactly the same. They're seeing it through different perspectives. Yeah. There's an apologetics term for that I can't remember right now, which means in a courtroom, these witnesses are reliable because they're saying the same thing, but they're not exactly saying the same thing. They have, it's all true and lines up. Yeah. But they have their different angles and perspectives.
It's not direct copying. Yeah. But it's the message that's being portrayed is the same.
Yeah. And then maybe the third subpoint on reliability of Scripture would be the fulfillment of prophecy. Yeah. Right. So you have the nation of Israel, right? That was prophesied, et cetera, et cetera. You have all of these fulfillments of Christ. Of course, somebody would have to kind of like believe in Christ, but to use that one. But certainly, the different exiles in Israel and all of that stuff. You know, we can really see, you know, that. These Old Testament documents were are reliable and written at that certain date, and therefore this prophecy is coming true.
Almost as if the whole thing was orchestrated by God. Yeah, you know, almost.
Yeah. So that is reliability of Scripture, and I feel like there's certainly some other subpoints that come.
Oh, I'm sure.
Can you think of one right now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, as far as Scripture goes, I mean, there's like you said, the prophecy is a big one for Scripture. How the Bible came together for me is like I know it's one a lot of non-believers will use as evidence that the Bible's not true. They'll say something like, well, that book was written by lots of different people and blah, blah. It's like, no, that's an evidence how it's true, right?
Because it all forms together perfectly.
Exactly. How does that happen? You know, and that's something Josh McDowell uses as an example where he'll say, well, just go around your town and take, 30 different people from your own town, all from the same age group, same occupation. Let's say you go down to the bank and you get 30 people that all work at the bank, and you have them all write a page on who God is. You're not going to have any kind of harmony. Yet it's not even that precise with the Bible. You have people across a span of hundreds of years, different occupations, different ages, different all this stuff, and yet what they've written is cohesive. And I know the skeptic might say, oh, there's contradictions all over the Bible. And I always say, where? Show me, because most of the ones you're going to say are things like, well, right here it says there was 2 angels at the tomb, and over here it says there was only 1. Contradiction! No, that's not a contradiction. If I'm out in the parking lot and I'm talking to John and Steve, and I come in and I tell my wife I was talking to John. Is that a true statement? Yep, I was talking to John. I didn't mention I was talking to Steve. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. It doesn't even mean I wasn't talking to him. You see what I'm saying? So that's usually where they go with what they call contradictions. That's not a contradiction. It has to be something very specific. Like, to use the same example, like if it said, in this account it says there was 2 angels at the tomb. And then the other account says there was only 1 angel at the tomb. That would be a contradiction.
Yeah.
Right? If that word only was used, because,
yeah,
both those things can't be true at the same time. So
yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of where I would go. But I mean, where you're going is awesome too. This is good stuff. Yeah, I think I would be convinced by now if I was assuming the Lord was working on my heart. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And then thirdly, people apologists rightly back up the validity of the resurrection.
Yes.
And that's seems to be a good cornerstone. I think they go with how the disciples were willing to be martyrs for that.
Yeah.
How there was women that were the first to testify of it, which in Jewish culture is not it
was a big no-no.
A reliable source, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then all of the over 400, was it 400? Is that an Acts? I forget it's 40 or 400. I think it's 400 witnesses that at one time or another saw Christ after.
Oh yeah, it was after he resurrected. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the number of witnesses and are pretty convincing. You know what I mean? Joseph Smith was the only one who said that he got the golden plates. So
and then they just vanished after he translated them, right?
So he didn't have anybody else there to confirm that.
Right. Well, and I've said this before too. Like, to me, the LDS, the Mormonism, is like obviously the most man-made, the man-centered. I mean, think about it. Hey guys, we're coming up with a religion. What should we do? I don't know. How about after we die, we rule a whole planet where all the women on the planet are just at our beck and call all the time? I mean, who else would think of that except a guy? Like, what would heaven be like? Well, I don't know. Just I'm the only guy on a planet full of hot chicks. Like, where their sole purpose is to do whatever I tell them to. It's like, come on.
Brigham Young had 54 or 56 wives. I was looking at this the other day.
Yeah.
Most of them were after Joseph got shot. So Joseph was in jail for trying to start up a riot. There was a printing press that was going to, produce some false publications. They had 2 mobs going, but he was in jail.
Yeah. But
there's an interesting chart on Wikipedia that shows all of Brigham Young's wives and how old, it's a scatter plot, how old they were when he married them, if he had children with them or not. Some of them he just married them to give them a celestial sort of place or something.
Yeah. So they could be on his planet with him someday.
Yeah. It's called sympathy polygamy.
Right.
You're 80, but let's do the ceremony. Just give them a ceremony and get them out of here.
You're on your way out anyway, so Yeah. Oh man.
So that was just to be nice, But anyway, the guy certainly, I wonder if Joseph would have put a break on it if he were around.
Right.
Because it was Brigham Young that really was like, hey, let's get some wives going here. I think Joseph probably had a couple too, but
Yeah.
It was the BYU guy that really started cranking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's to me another thing. Like when we talk about Christianity versus all the other belief systems, like Christianity has been the same since day one. Like people try to change it. They say, "Well, that we don't believe that part of the Bible anymore." Yeah, but the Bible still says it, right? It's like a lot of Mormons like, "Oh, we don't believe in polygamy anymore." Like, well, why not? Like, who says? Did God change his mind? Because God apparently spoke through your prophets and said that this is the way to go. Right, or how in the old days of Mormonism, there was a lot of racism in there. Like black people were known as fallen angels and that kind of stuff. But now they've like stricken all that stuff off the record, understandably so.
Yeah.
Because that's not PC anymore.
Yeah.
But if God is the one founding your religion, you're telling me he didn't foresee that? Oh, maybe this racism thing isn't going to play out later. Let's just get that off. Let's not even put that in there. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just more and more proof that that's all man stuff. It's not God stuff. You know what I mean? So, anyway. All right, man. That's all I have to say.
You better find somebody you can disagree with, because...
No, we disagreed on some stuff.
Yeah, but it wasn't things that we couldn't talk about.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
It's always stuff we can talk about. I am open to talk about whatever it is, you know? If I agree with you, I'll say so. If I don't, I'll say so. Yeah, that's the way this goes. Mm-hmm. Well, it's fun, man. Thanks. It's fun to get to know you and hang out, you know? I'm sure we'll have many more conversations like this in the future, just not recorded. So.
Yeah, and if anybody in your listening audience wants to talk to me, you can give them their information or something.
Ooh, you know, that's an open. Okay.
I'm sure if that's a thing that happens, like, hey, this guy was interesting, or this guy wasn't. I want to talk to him about this, and
I want to take that guy to lunch and pick his brain. You know.
Yeah. So that's a way for people to network. You know?
For sure, man. I'm so glad that you chose to take time out of your own schedule to listen to this episode. I hope it was worth it to you. I would love to hear what you think. Please send me a message at whycan'twetallkaboutthat at proton.me. If you think it would be lots of fun to have a discussion with me, and then broadcast that discussion to the whole world, now is your chance. I'm always looking for guests, so let me know if you're interested. Here's a small section of next week's conversation.
I just don't see how you can actually perform targeted revenge or targeted attacks against an invisible force. You know, Hamas is just Palestinian people that are radicalized. And I think that when you're trying to eradicate this group, it's a blurred line, and it's consistently a blurred line with, you know, like if you look at stuff that happened in Iraq as well, you know, you can say these people were trying to attack us, these people were blah, 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 you know, and there's no way that we as the people know that that's actually what was occurring.
Right.
You know?
Well, you touched on a good point. Well, actually, you touched on two good points, something that I've never thought of before. First of all, I'll go with that first, because that does kind of blow my mind what you just said. I've never thought about that, is that it's not like Hamas, as far as I know, is over there with wearing t-shirts that say, we're part of Hamas. You know what I mean? So yes, to go over there and try to target somebody that looks like everybody else is almost a fool's errand. Like, how are you going to do that? You'd have to have some really good intel, really good ways, which they may or may not have. I have no idea. I'm not over there.